It must be nice for draft prospects to know that as long as you get drafted early, even if you're a bust, the Dallas Cowboys will still just trade for you in 2 years. Welcome in, everybody, to the reveal of the number 18 team in my power rankings heading into the 2025 NFL season. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into the Dallas Cowboys. This is a team that a lot of people like to hate on and make fun of. I will say this. I don't think all hope is lost for the Dallas Cowboys that they can still be a pretty good football team this year. Needless to say, this team is in kind of a weird state in their franchise, and that leaves us with a lot to talk about here today. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with this deep dive. As we jump in, if you could take just a second to hit that like button, I really do appreciate it. It helps me out. It tells other Cowboys fans and NFL sickos just like you that you enjoy the video and to check it out themselves. Also, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of our remaining deep dives as we lead up to the number one team in my power rankings. But here we go. And for anybody that did miss the Steelers deep dive, I have made a format change for these deep dives. Instead of starting with the full offseason changes breakdown, we are now going to be building that offseason changes graphic up throughout the course of the video, getting into each individual position's worth of changes before we talk about each position group. Collected a lot of feedback from you guys, and the large majority of people really liked the change. Anytime you make a change like that, you're not going to be able to please everybody, so I do apologize to those that did voice their displeasure with the change, but I am going to go forward with this based on all of the feedback I collected, and I personally do think it is an upgrade to the overall flow of this conversation. So until further notice, this will be the new format here, which means we begin with the coach and scheme breakdown for the Dallas Cowboys, and we can show all of the big changes they made with this coaching staff really flipping the leadership of this team on its heels, at least from a coaching perspective, where Mike McCarthy finally gets fired here. I was surprised they brought him back last year, and it went about as you could have expected. With that, Mike Zimmer is no longer going to be back as the defensive coordinator, and they also move on from John Fossil. Maybe a bit of a surprise. I feel like he was doing a pretty good job with the special teams, but they do move on from him as the special teams coordinator. And then coming in / getting promoted is going to be Brian Schottenheimer, who was their offensive coordinator the last few years. One of my favorite defensive coordinator hires around the league here. They get Matt Eberflus, who just got fired in Chicago. That one I'm very excited about. And then they do get Clayton Adams as well as the offensive coordinator, who was the offensive line coach in Arizona. I like that, by the way, before we even get into his scheme and what he's going to bring to the table here. I like the idea if you're going to have a play caller as your head coach, if your offensive coordinator for all intents and purposes is going to be your head coach, why not use that vacancy of the de facto offensive coordinator to go and poach a highly respected offensive line coach that otherwise you can only hire up. You know what I'm saying? You can't go to another team and say, I want to hire your offensive line coach to be our offensive line coach. But if you're going to kind of have, in some ways, just this open asset of an offensive coordinator, quote unquote, position, if that makes sense, like we all know Schottenheimer is the offensive coordinator here, why not use that as an opportunity to go kind of poach a good offensive line coach for a young offensive line here in Dallas that does need to show some development? So I really like that process from Dallas, something that we don't usually give Jerry Jones and the Cowboys front office a lot of credit when they do make good decisions, because they are one of the more hated on leadership structures in the league. But between the Eberflus hire and the Clayton Adams hire, big fan. And then Nick Sorensen as well is who they're going with as their special teams coordinator. We'll see how that one goes. I mean, Niners fans are kind of laughing about that. He failed miserably as a kind of half and half defensive coordinator with Brandon Staley in San Francisco last year. But with that, as we are saying upgraded or downgraded on each of these individual aspects of the team here, with the coaching staff, I did say hopefully upgraded. We will obviously see the type of job Brian Schottenheimer can do, but those that have been around this channel know that I'm just not a big fan of what Mike McCarthy is bringing to an NFL team in the year 2024. So moving on from him, it's not like it's going to be too hard to replace what you were getting there from the head coach. And then I do really like the Matt Eberflus hire and the Clayton Adams addition. So again, hopefully upgraded with the coaching staff. And it's going to just generally speaking be hard to be downgraded. But let's get into this coach and scheme segment and let's just get it out of the way. The kind of elephant in the room to talk about here. Somebody in this series had to come in ranked as my 32nd head coach. And that is going to be Brian Schottenheimer, who was a big surprise when the Dallas Cowboys announced that they were going with him as the head coach, really in the middle of everybody's head coaching interviews and coaching searches. He emerged the Shefty bomb that, they're not really doing too many interviews. Looks like they're going to go with Brian Schottenheimer as the head coach. And it was just a big surprise. Like nobody really was considering him as a head coach, whether it was NFL teams. Nobody was waiting to see if the Cowboys were going to retain him so that they could interview him for a head coach. You look at all those top, head coach candidate lists. Nobody was considering Brian Schottenheimer that way. So, the Cowboys and Brian Schottenheimer do have a lot to prove with this hire, with it being a little bit out there. And unfortunately, you can't have this conversation without at least bringing up the criticism that I think is relevant, that this probably, at least to some degree, is yet another yes man hire for Jerry Jones. That's been the criticism of Jason Garrett and Mike McCarthy, where whatever you think about them as football coaches, at the end of the day, Jerry Jones has a coach that's going to step aside anytime Jerry Jones wants to make a big decision for the team. Sometimes that's a roster decision that could be detrimental to the team building aspect. But I also think there was the article that came out about a former player talking about, being in a team intensive workout that in any other building in the league would be private and closed off to the public. But this player was discussing a situation where he was finishing his workout. He turned around and was surprised to see this large wave of fans with cameras up close and personal and having to kind of put your entertainer face on. And there's this side of being the Dallas Cowboys attached to Jerry Jones that is the show of it all, the star, the Cowboys, having a coach that's going to allow little moments like that to continue. It is a negative aspect of the coaching and leadership and culture structure of the Dallas Cowboys that I think at least needs to be a part of a 2-hour video detailing the Dallas Cowboys. And I think the Brian Schottenheimer hire is going to allow the continuation of that. And that is going to be reflected in the overall coaching culture ranking that we give the Dallas Cowboys. They come in 26th to 30th with the overall coaching culture grade for this team, which is sort of that, obviously, discussion of the team's culture, but at the end of the day, the sort of benefit of the doubt slider. So that's kind of out of the way. I don't think anyone's really going to argue with that, to be honest, but it needed to be said. But with a lot more time over the last 3 months or so to really sit and kind of think about Brian Schottenheimer as the hire here, after the initial kind of shock factor wears off. Like I said, nobody saw this hire coming, I don't think. And maybe people closer to the Cowboys were less surprised by this. But the more I've thought about it, I hate it less, and I'm at least interested to see how this goes. I mean, Brian Schottenheimer, I don't think has done a bad job with this offense in the last few years, watching the Dak Prescott offense post Kellen Moore leaving. I think it's been a continuation of the things they do well, and again, Cowboys fans will chime in here as well, and pretty much every fan base hates their play caller, but as a neutral bystander watching the Cowboys over the last 2 years with Brian Schottenheimer as the offensive coordinator and Mike McCarthy kind of overseeing this offense on top of Schottenheimer, I don't think play calling has really been their issue, if that makes sense. So I think you're able to kind of continue what they know and what they do well within this building. Dak's going to be able to come off the injury and kind of hit the ground running. He doesn't have to learn a new playbook and kind of take on that whole aspect, which I think for a quarterback that is I mean, he is quite possibly maybe outside of Joe Burrow, but it's like Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow right now are the two premium quarterbacks that can walk up to the line of scrimmage, make checks, make adjustments, knowing their offense when they have full control of it. I think being able to stay within the same playbook with the same coordinator, you can sell that to me a little bit more, especially with a Dak Prescott as your quarterback. So, like, I actually think the design of the offense, the play calling, I'm just not really worried about it, which that's a good thing. There's other teams where we're worried about the play calling. So I think that's at least a plus. And then you look at him like, okay, yeah, no one was really taking him seriously as a head coach candidate, but he is Marty Schottenheimer's son. He's been around this league for 30 years. And he's also like been away from Marty, his dad, for now 20 years. Like, he has built a career for himself. And like I said, it kind of as the OC last year, I don't think he did a bad job, even if he did have Mike McCarthy, another offensive mind, right there with him. So in terms of running a locker room, relating to players, he has to prove that he's good at that. But there's at least a lot of background there to believe that, okay, maybe he is actually going to be pretty good at this. I guess what I'm saying is I'm open to the idea that this might not end up being a disaster promotion for the Dallas Cowboys. It's out there. They are beating to their own drum. They did something that nobody really would have told them to do. So it's up to the Cowboys to prove that this was a good hire. But I'm at least open to the idea. But before we do flip over to the defensive coaching discussion, let's talk a little bit more about what the scheme looks like here in Dallas. And we should talk about Clayton Adams a little bit more too, and what he could potentially be bringing to the table here. But this is very much, I think we can expect, going to be a continuation of the Cowboys offense that we've seen for a long time now with Dak Prescott and his skill set and kind of how they like to do things. And that offense is probably the most quote unquote classic pro style offense in the NFL. I mean, Josh McDaniels is making his return as an offensive coordinator this year in New England. So he might be the other one that's more, if you were to try to find an offense in the year 2025 that looks at least somewhat like an offense in 2008, you would pick from this offense right here for sure. And what that really means, I think it starts with just the under center operation of the offense at large. Not afraid to kind of put a lot on the plate of the quarterback where he can walk up to the line, make checks, look at the defense pre-snap, even change the play if need be. But also to have like a quick under center passing game. That just doesn't really exist in the NFL. The idea that you're going to have a drop back passing game with the quarterback with his hands under the center, like, I'm telling you, it just doesn't really exist. But you will see that with the Cowboys. The use of stick and quick game where they want Dak to take 3 and 5 step drops and get that ball out at the top of his drop, where that quick game aspect is an extension of this team's run game. And speaking of the run game, you do see your fair share of just north and south under center run game, whether it's just true power, pulling linemen, counter from under center. It's not that those types of runs don't exist on other teams, but it is even more of an emphasis on a north and south run game than so many of these other offenses that are either shotgun oriented inside run games or the sort of Shanahan wide zone run game. Those certainly aren't the core identities of the Cowboys run game, and I fully expect that that's going to stay the same, especially when you look at like the Tyler Booker draft pick, who is kind of a throwback guard, who's not as good as a kind of athletic wide zone run blocker. And I don't think they draft him 12th overall or whatever it was if they had plans of becoming a Shanahan wide zone style offense here. So, that's kind of the heart of what makes it a pro style offense. But, the continuation of putting a lot on Dak's plate to make checks at the line and have a lot of advanced route progressions in their third down passing game, their true drop back passing game as well. I think at the end of the day, the Cowboys have shown that the idea that you can have a pro style offense in 2025, it's not dead, but you do need a quarterback like Dak Prescott that can handle the multiplicity of a pro style offense, but if you have it, you can be very multiple and throw a lot of different punches and keep defenses off guard and not really know what's always coming. So that's a good thing, I think. And like I said, to be able to kind of continue that with Brian Schottenheimer, I think is a good thing. We didn't mention the offensive coaching rankings. They are going to come in quite low. Like I said, Brian Schottenheimer just does have a lot to prove. But just to get it out of the way here, they come in 22nd to 30th for pass game coaching. And they do really got to get this run game going. It's been a while since Dallas has been able to run the ball effectively, 28th to 32nd there. But plenty of room to go up. Those are just kind of placeholder rankings being a little bit more unproven here for sure. And if there were Cowboys fans that want to argue that those rankings are too low, I get it. He's been here. He's been the coordinator. Things have been run pretty well here. There is a side of this where, okay, yeah, he is now removed from Mike McCarthy, who did oversee the offense at the end of the day. So I think Brian Schottenheimer has to prove, number one, that he's really, really good at this. Like, I think he's shown in his position that things can run okay. But I don't think anybody's sitting here pounding the table like, yeah, Brian Schottenheimer is a scheme lord at this point in time. He's got to prove that he can get closer to that. But he also has to prove, what he is separated from Mike McCarthy. But let's quickly discuss Clayton Adams as well before we get to the defensive discussion here. I already kind of mentioned I like the idea of hiring an offensive line coach to be your offensive coordinator if your head coach is going to be your offensive coordinator. But I think Clayton Adams has done some really good stuff. He was, I believe, an assistant offensive line coach in Indianapolis in the Frank Reich era, 2019, 2020. That was before their offensive lines really went to shit and when they were actually really, really good. That would have been when the emergence of Braden Smith came in. Obviously, Ryan Kelly and Quentin Nelson are really talented players, but those Indianapolis offensive lines were really, really good for a few years there. He was a part of that, and then he becomes the full-time offensive line coach in Arizona, where you don't think of the Arizona Cardinals having this outstanding offensive line, but you also don't think about them having a bad offensive line, which is a huge testament to the work Clayton Adams did, because talent-wise, really all they had was Paris Johnson, who I think Clayton Adams did a very good job with his development from year 1 to year 2. But the rest of the unit, like, I ask you guys, can you name another offensive lineman on the Arizona Cardinals? I know many of you guys can, but I think there's a good chunk of people that would consider themselves pretty firm NFL fans that couldn't tell you anybody else on that offensive line, and they were pretty damn solid. They did really good stuff with the development of someone like Hjalte Froholt, for example. So I think Clayton Adams is well respected, and to poach him is a really good move. Now, as far as the schematic influences there, I don't think he's going to come in and change the identity of this offense, but he is going to be able to provide some different perspectives here. I mean, the Frank Reich offense was a little bit more pro style, but it all stems from this sort of Andy Reid modern pro spread offense. So I think in terms of shotgun run game stuff, he might have some good ideas. Anytime you have an offensive line coach, you do think run game. And the Arizona Cardinals run game was one of the more diabolical, unique run games in the league, with tons of different counters and the way they use the QB run game and different pullers and stuff. Like, they did some really fun stuff with that Cardinals offense, and this is a loss for the Cardinals in my opinion. So I do think, I don't think he's so stuck to the idea that, okay, Drew Petzing comes from a Shanahan wide zone style offense. I don't think Clayton Adams is going to come in here and try to make this offensive line a wide zone run scheme. But I do think he's going to be able to provide a lot of unique thoughts to mix things up with this run game that could be a really big asset for the Cowboys. So I think it's a really good hire. And if nothing else, just from an offensive line development standpoint, we'll talk about this offensive line in a little bit. They have a lot of young players that need to develop here. So if you're going to go with Brian Schottenheimer, that was a little bit of an out there hire, I think going to poach a Clayton Adams was really good process here. But with that, let's flip over to the defensive coaching, where I just don't have the same level of questions in terms of how good the coaching is going to be on the defensive side of the ball. I think going to get Matt Eberflus, who you're going to be able to just hand the keys to the defense over to and let Brian and Clayton just kind of deal with the offense. That's fantastic. I mean, Matt Eberflus had his shortcomings as a head coach for the Chicago Bears, just as so many defensive head coaches do. But he did reset the culture there. They became a very tough football team. They just did. And their defenses, despite really never having defensive line talent outside of Montez Sweat, and a secondary group that ebbed and flowed throughout time, really around Jalen Johnson's talents. I just don't think that he had a ton of talent to work with in Chicago. And the last 2 years, they were a very stable top 10 defense. And even by the end of his first season in Chicago, he did get that defense playing much better. You go back to what he did in Indianapolis as well with those Darius Leonard-led defenses. Those were also defenses that I think were about 15th to 20th in terms of talent base, that every single year were top 10 defenses. I think a lot of Matt Eberflus coaching a defense. As a head coach, I think you can do a lot better. I think you could swing bigger than that. But to get a guy that now is not going to be getting a head coach spot anytime soon, I don't think, that's the perfect setup. I love that. That is the formula that the Chiefs have designed for the rest of the league here. Hey, go get one of these premium defensive coaches that failed as a head coach that's now going to be able to just hang around here, develop chemistry with not just the players and help from a player development standpoint, not just be able to develop this sort of archive of knowledge throughout the years, where 3 years from now, Matt Eberflus will be able to go to hopefully DeMarvion Overshown or whoever the leaders of the defense might be and say, hey, you know, the Eagles just beat us with this play. Do you remember 2 years ago when we made that adjustment and it worked and it shut that thing down? Let's do that again. Like having that team chemistry and cohesion is something that the Chiefs have behind the scenes that we don't get to kind of see in plain sight, but it's in there. You better freaking believe it. So that's what they're hoping to build over time here. And as Matt Eberflus has shown, he can get this defense kind of put together pretty quickly, as he did in that first year in Chicago. But the other thing I was going to say there was also having that chemistry with the front office and the scouts, where the Chiefs, for example, know exactly the types of cornerbacks to scout for their defensive coordinator, all the different position groups, the specific role fits that you can find in the 6th round that will make an impact for your defense. That's a huge part of continuity with your coaching staff too, is having that synergy with the front office as well. So that's what you're going for with the Matt Eberflus hire. I think it's really smart from that perspective, and to just get someone that knows how to coach a defense here. So they come in already with very favorable rankings for the defensive coaching. They're top 20 for pass defense coaching with a B grade, and then even better for run defense coaching, 10th to 14th there with a B+ grade. Things got away from Chicago a little bit last year, but the 2 years previous, they did some really good stuff from a run defense perspective, and those Indianapolis defenses too were always stout against the run, and Eberflus especially puts a premium on, stopping you on early downs, getting you into third down. But let's talk about his scheme a little bit more here before we really dive into the roster breakdown here. There isn't as much to say about Matt Eberflus's scheme, to be honest. It is one of the more simple schemes in the league. He definitely prefers that sort of simplify the defense so that people can play fast and understand their assignments and not blow assignments approach to coaching the defense. And yeah, he is for the most part going to come out in a 4-2 defense. If you want to come out in heavy personnel, he's not afraid to get into a 4-3 base. So you'll see some of those 4-3 formations out there to try to stop the run, but for the most part, you're going to be in a 4-2 nickel defense, and it is a lot of zone. The Colts, going back to when Eberflus was there, and the Bears, always near the top 5 to 10 in zone coverage called. A cover 3 is going to be the core that they want to go with, and then their changeup is probably going to be cover 2. We've seen at times them do some of the split safety quarter stuff. this isn't a true kind of Fangio-inspired defense in that sense, with the sort of split safety look, but they understand the value of some of those defensive structures, and Eberflus will get into it at the right time to kind of play some bend-don't-break defense when necessary. But yeah, not a lot of blitzing, honestly. He wants to be able to win with 4, something that's honestly what blows me away, is that the Bears' defenses were pretty good with his style of defense, despite the fact that they have had one of the worst front fours in the league for the last 3 years. And if you're going to drop 7 into coverage and not blitz a ton, as Eberflus really doesn't like to do, you need those guys up front to win. And they just weren't able to do that all the time. So that means they had very sound coverage on the back end, but also you're calling the right zones at the right time and understanding how opposing offenses are trying to attack you and what to call to take that away. So very impressive in that regard. We did see last year they started to blitz a little bit more, and honestly, when Eberflus did dial up some of those blitzes, he did some, he showed some stuff pre-snap and got some free rushers, and when he did blitz, they were very effective. And that's all very much backed up by the numbers. So they were 20th out of 32 in blitz rate last year. But despite that, they were first in total EPA added when blitzing in the NFL. So they blitzed less than 19 other teams, but still generated more EPA off of their blitzes with that rate. So really impressive blitz designs from Eberflus, and now he's got like Micah Parsons to work with. So that's definitely something to get excited about if you're a Cowboys fan. I again am just a huge fan of getting him. I think the Clayton Adams hire makes a ton of sense. And those are probably a big reason why, 3 months removed from the shock factor of Brian Schottenheimer is going to be the head coach of the Cowboys, at least they followed it up with, in my opinion, 2 very sound hires here. And I think there is a big opportunity here for Dallas and this staff to prove that they actually do know what they're doing, that they don't deserve this mass wave of criticism for these 3 coaches here, and that they can actually be a significant upgrade from what they had in Mike McCarthy, which is a lot less to ask. But someone had to rank 32nd. It is going to be Brian Schottenheimer as far as the head coach rankings, but it's not all bad with this staff from my perspective either. All right, it is time to get into the meat and bones of this video, the roster breakdown. But before we do that, I would like to thank the sponsor for today's video, SeatGeek, the best ticketing app out there. Guys, the summer months are here. Go enjoy the weather. We are heading into the second half of the MLB season. Go catch a ball game. Go dial into the pennant race. This has been a really fun baseball season, you guys. So go have some fun. Go get some tickets on SeatGeek. Go see a concert. This is the time, man. And SeatGeek has got you covered. They have the best prices out there, and they make it easy to make sure you are getting the most bang for your buck. Their user interface is clean and easy to use. Just look for the green dots. You know you're getting the most bang for your buck. And they'll even show you an actual image of what that seat's going to look like right there. You'll get your tickets right in the app. You don't have to jump through email chains and, dealing with third-party vendors and all this stuff. You will have a stress-free approach to the gate. And now if you use code TFG10 at checkout, you can support my channel all in the process and save up to $20 on your next ticket purchase. That is code TFG10. Thank you to SeatGeek for having the best ticketing app out there as someone that does like to go to a lot of baseball games and does use SeatGeek quite a lot. So thank you to SeatGeek for that, but also for being great partners to work with over the years. But now, let's begin the roster breakdown with the Dak Prescott conversation and the quarterback room here. And as far as the offseason changes go with the quarterback room, you do have to say upgraded with this group because Dak Prescott didn't even play half the season last year. There's no real reason to believe that he's going to get hurt again, although one more year of Dak getting hurt, we might be starting to have some more conversations about him being injury prone there. But for now, fully expecting a healthy Dak Prescott available for this team. And then some shuffling with the backup room. They let Cooper Rush go to Baltimore. Trey Lance no longer with the team. They go trade for Joe Milton from New England, and they bring in Will Grier as QB3 as well. But yeah, really with the Dak Prescott coming back from injury, the quarterback room should very much be upgraded from what they had last year. And it is quite funny. If you could go back 3 years ago and tell TFG in 2022 that you would be sitting here defending Dak Prescott to the masses, I would have laughed in your face. Like, I used to be a big critic of Dak Prescott and pointing out all of the detractions from his game and, saying he was getting overrated, where at the time, he was viewed as a top 5 to 8 quarterback in the league by many, many people. And I just couldn't quite get there. But it is funny how things happen with these quarterbacks, where eventually that narrative swings a little bit too far back in the other direction. And at the end of the day, my opinion on Dak Prescott really hasn't changed that much. But now all of a sudden, I find myself higher on Dak Prescott, where I do rank him as the 9th overall quarterback inside the top 10 of quarterbacks. And he's kind of in this range where it's like him and Jared Goff, where I'm not quite ready to drop him into where I have my tier 2 quarterbacks, which by my definition, a tier 2 quarterback is a great quarterback, a perennial playoff contender, and a quarterback that you genuinely expect, as long as your team isn't ass, that in a 10-year window, you're going to get a Super Bowl with that quarterback. I don't think Dak is quite on that level. And I'll be honest, if we saw a little bit higher end play from him in January when the playoffs rolled around, we very much could have Dak Prescott in that range at this point. But he's also like kind of a tick above the other tier 3 quarterbacks, where it's kind of like everything needs to be perfect if you're going to win a Super Bowl. I don't think it necessarily has to be perfect for Dak to win a Super Bowl. With him, I think it really is the playoff January disgusting performances that we've had to watch from Dak Prescott, where it's like, I don't know if we can expect to win a Super Bowl with Dak Prescott until we see it. But needless to say, like, ranking him as the 9th quarterback in the league, you don't see a ton of people that have Dak inside the top 10 these days. And I do still think the Cowboys are in good hands with Dak Prescott. Is it a little crazy that they went ahead and gave him $60 million a year when that's not really the market for a top quarterback right now? Like, he makes about $5 million average more than any other quarterback in the league. I certainly don't enjoy having to pay Dak Prescott quite that much. And that's more of a Cowboys problem. That's not Dak's fault. The way the Cowboys have handled all of their contracts with their star players has held this team back in many, many ways. But beyond that, like, I think the Cowboys are in good hands with Dak Prescott. I think you're talking about a quarterback that is 1A, 1B with Joe Burrow in terms of processing, decision-making, especially pre-snap processing, the way he can look at a defense before the snap, see the way a safety's leaning, use the cadence to force those safety rotations before the ball gets snapped so he knows what the coverage is going to be, and then to know right at the snap what his coverage beater is, what route in that play is going to beat that coverage. Like, he's got your bases covered there. He gets the ball out on time. He's tremendously accurate, not just raw accuracy in terms of not missing throws, but he also has that ball placement and the touch to throw these really catchable balls to really all 3 levels of the field. I think that's one area with Dak early in his career I was very critical of, that I've come around on with him, or he's impressed me more one way or another. I think his deep ball is pretty damn good, even though I wouldn't say he has a top 10 to 15 arm in terms of arm strength. Just like a Joe Burrow in many ways, he can still throw that deep ball accurately and with touch in a way that makes it more catchable, kind of like Russell Wilson too. If you get that arc and placement on those balls, it can really increase the receiver's chances of being able to come down with some of these throws. And pairing that with a George Pickens is pretty damn exciting here. He has his drawbacks, right? Like, I think you do put Joe Burrow ahead of Dak in terms of processing and decision making, because you do see Dak, I think, make more head scratching decisions. And like, the Cowboys put a lot on Dak's plate to make really high end full field progression reads and to make a lot of his own pre-snap determinations. And he does guess wrong. You see, I don't know, 8 to 12 really ugly interceptions each season from Dak Prescott, where it's like, what the hell were you thinking? And unfortunately, it has been against the better defenses. and against the playoff defenses that have been able to really confuse him and force some of those bad throws. Whether that's a Jair Alexander jumping the backside slant in the playoffs, or seemingly every time he plays the 49ers, he forgets how to read a defense. Like, that is a part of the conversation with Dak Prescott, that if he could just get over the hump of just beating more of these real playoff caliber teams in the playoffs, not make those critical mistakes in those big moments, I would feel much better about him as more of a tier 2 type of quarterback. That's all minutia, though. I still, at the end of the day, think Dak Prescott has become underrated. He's a core reason why the Cowboys do rank as our 18th overall offense. And this very much could be a top 10 passing offense in the league with him and the weapons that he's going to have to throw to. So I think I find myself in a pretty positive territory in terms of discussing Dak Prescott, and I think even most Cowboys fans have opened up to the idea of some of his drawbacks. And I didn't even bring up the thing I always bang on him for, where I don't love his ability to know when and how to extend plays with his feet. I wish he extended plays more, because when he does, he can scramble and make throws on the run really well. But there's a lot of times where he has that drop and shoot mentality, where if it's 3rd and 8, instead of mitigating the rush and extending plays, he wants to throw that deep ball to his big wide receiver, his possession wide receiver. Unfortunately, now that guy's going to be George Pickens, who might be the best jump ball receiver in the league. But that is kind of he wants to kind of put the ball in the hands of the receiver, whereas I would say the 4 elite quarterbacks, they want to extend the play, get out of the pocket or move inside the pocket and try to create those higher percentage looks. I do think when you go against good pass rushes and great defenses, that's another area where he has his shortcomings. But, like I was saying, I think Cowboys fans are kind of aware that, okay, he's not an elite guy, or maybe not even a tier 2 guy, but if they build things the right way here, which is harder to do when he's making $60 million, but if they build things the right way here, this is still a quarterback that can win the Super Bowl, and he's a guy that would be really hard to move off of, but you're also not putting yourself in the best situation to win a Super Bowl. So they are in a tougher spot than you would be if you had an elite quarterback, but it's not an impossible spot either. And I do not think Dak is the problem here, certainly. He's way closer to being the solution than he is the problem, if that makes sense. He's just got to play better when the lights are brightest. That's the biggest thing. And I'm usually the last person to bring that up on a quarterback, but it has been so bad with Dak Prescott that there seems to be something in there. So Cowboys fans will have to let me know what they think of the assessment of Dak Prescott there and the 9th overall ranking. We should mention Joe Milton for at least a minute here. They go and trade for him from New England, drafted in the 6th round by the Patriots last year. And, it was just a total dart throw for New England. I think just in a 2% case scenario where Drake May looked like crap, maybe take another guy with freak traits, see what happens. That obviously didn't happen. Drake May was the guy as they fully expected him to be. And they have less of a need for the upside of a Joe Milton, I think. But also at the same time, I think in the back of their mind, they maybe thought Joe Milton could be a tight end for them. And Milton came in week 18 last year and really throughout the course of the season seemed to do a good job taking on NFL coaching, working on his footwork, working on his processing and decision-making. And he did have a really big performance in week 18, and enough for Joe Milton to have enough to stand on and say, no, I'm not going to convert to tight end. I'm going to keep going with this quarterback thing. That was the most development we've seen from Joe Milton in 6 years of football. I mean, whether it was at Michigan or Tennessee, he was just not someone that played the quarterback position. He was just an athlete with a cannon arm that didn't really go through reads, especially the accuracy was just so bad from Joe Milton. And because of that, he still has everything to prove, even before I consider him like a quality backup. But the traits on Joe Milton are absurd. He's big, fast, and already has one of the strongest, if not the strongest arms from a raw, just grip it and rip it point of view. So to bring him in when Dak's had some injuries and getting a little bit older, why not? It's kind of the same thing they were thinking with Trey Lance, where it's like a quote-unquote high upside backup. If Dak goes down, you have a guy that maybe there's a dream scenario where he just explodes onto the scene. Very, very unlikely with Joe Milton still, but that Week 18 performance against the Bills was impressive, enough that it, I believe, cost the Patriots the number 1 overall pick. But definitely a fun backup. There is a Joe Milton fan club out there that believes things are going to work for him. And I would love to see it, because anytime traits like this come together at the quarterback position, it's, usually something like Josh Allen, Cam Newton, Lamar Jackson type of stuff, which is great to watch. I certainly am not betting on that, but, they had a bunch of draft picks to, use a 5th or a 6th round or whatever to get a cheap backup for the next 3 years that can do some fun stuff in the design run game. Yeah, there's worse ways to build your backup quarterback room. And then Super Bowl champion Will Grier also is their camp arm and QB3 right now. But let's move forward and talk about this sensational group of weapons that Dak has to throw to, where he already had one of the best wide receivers in CeeDee Lamb. They do make one big change this offseason, and that was trading a 3rd-round pick to bring in George Pickens from the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the only loss in this group is the old Brandon Cooks, who played 40% of their snaps. Not too much to be worried about there, especially when you're upgrading this group with George Pickens. So this is a really special group. They rank inside the top 5 for weapons in the NFL for me, in a league that has some groups of just all-time great weapons in the league right now. But yeah, it's an A grade, 4th to 5th. The combination of this group and Dak Prescott make up the core argument for why the Cowboys could be good this year, honestly. And that obviously starts with CeeDee Lamb, who is firmly inside the top 5 receivers in the NFL. And I think he is the cutoff for the tier 1 of wide receivers as well. I think Nico Collins is threatening that, who I would rank as wide receiver 5. But yeah, if you're talking about a true elite alpha number 1 wide receiver who can threaten to all 3 levels of the defense, make insane catches, produce after the catch, separate within all of their routes, and has a record of production where you can legitimately funnel the offense through this player, and in many times is a player that opposing teams will focus on doubling against, whether you're sliding safeties in their direction or actually playing double team bracketed coverage. NFL defenses double teaming wide receivers is less common than you would think, but you usually only see it when you're talking about someone in that top tier of just truly uncoverable guys. And that's CeeDee Lamb. He has deserved that, even if he isn't quite what I would say Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and even, yes, A.J. Brown in this division have established. But that is not a slight to CeeDee. Obviously, I think the world of him, and I see no reason to believe that with Dak back for a full season, with a George Pickens in the building here, that CeeDee Lamb can't get right back to what he was in 2023 as a offensive player of the year candidate and someone that's putting up 15, 16, 1,700 yard seasons. And because last year his numbers were down a little bit with Dak missing over half the season, I actually think if you're talking about those underdog fantasy season-long pick'ems, CeeDee Lamb at just 1,200 receiving yards higher or lower feels very comfortable. So if you want to maybe piggyback off of the DK Metcalf getting higher than 950 receiving yards that we had in our last deep dive, that might be a nice little season-long pick'em lineup to put together. So if you guys do want to play on Underdog, where you can also do best ball drafts, it is code TFG at signup. You'll also support my channel in the process and get a bonus match up to $1,000. But back to CeeDee Lamb here, just expecting a monster season, and like, seriously, what else is there to say other than he is a core reason why this Cowboys team even sniffs the top 20? Because there's aspects of this team that we still got to talk about, and even with the coaching staff a little bit that we have talked about, like there's aspects of this team that have some pretty major question marks, but to have this guy in the building with the Dak Prescott, you're going to see some special stuff back at it again this year. And then I love now George Pickens coming in here. I have no idea how they're going to make all of this work financially because Micah Parsons still has not been paid, and Jesus, man, that number keeps going up. Get it done, Cowboys. What are we doing here? Because, okay, TJ Watt just got $41 million. You got to scratch all the negotiations with Micah Parsons. That number is not getting any smaller. Freaking get it done. But you're going to be paying CD, Micah, and Dak Prescott like $130 million AAV. George Pickens himself is going to want something like what DK Metcalf just got. His replacement in Pittsburgh, $33 million himself. So I don't know if Pickens is going to be able to be retained here for the long haul. This might be a case where they traded a third-round pick for him, they let him walk in free agency, and they get a third-round compensatory pick back because he gets so much money. We'll see how it all plays out. But I do expect George Pickens to produce at a very high level here. He is going to consistently draw number 2 outside corners, where, as you guys have seen throughout the course of this deep dive, there is a big difference for a lot of teams between who their number 1 corner is and who their number 2 corner is. So for George Pickens to get that guy now, a lot of the time where safeties are also going to be shading their over-the-top coverage in favor of CeeDee Lamb, Pickens is going to be able to eat on the boundary, on those dig routes, whatever they're asking him to do. He's going to get a lot of work here, and this team is going to throw the ball a lot, by the way. So I am not afraid of saying CeeDee's going to eat and George Pickens is going to eat. But the biggest reason I love this acquisition is Dak Prescott. We talked about this a little bit. He has been at his best when he has a guy just like George Pickens. You go back to Dez Bryant, but even in many ways when Michael Gallup had that year or two of being a really good number 2 wide receiver, I mentioned it already. Dak Prescott, when he gets in a pinch, when it's 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, he doesn't use his feet a ton. And if that's going to be a negative aspect of Dak's game, at least give him a guy like George Pickens, who I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you want to use the Madden analogy here, if any receiver in the NFL should have 99 spectacular catch, I really think George Pickens in that kind of category is the best in the NFL. Just put the ball in his area. It can be a little off target. It could be way over his head. It could be 2 feet behind him. He is going to contort his body. He will pluck it with one arm. He will elevate over a DB if he needs to. He will find a way to not just catch the ball, but get his feet down and secure it down to the ground. And for Dak to have a guy in a pinch to just launch it up to, where Dak does generally throw a more catchable ball than you would expect. And we saw this a little bit last year with some of that comparison to how Russell Wilson throws those balls to the boundary. Same idea with George Pickens, if not elevated here. So I think we're talking about a big year for George Pickens as well. He's another guy I've been targeting in basically any fantasy format I can find. Again, we'll see if they can retain him, but that might make just watching this wide receiver duo with Dak Prescott this year, no matter how many games the Cowboys win, this could very well be the best wide receiver duo in the NFL if George Pickens can clean up some of the drops, stay focused, because he has had some kind of off-field practice procedural concerns, certainly. His football character has certainly been brought into question and is a core reason why the Steelers traded him away. And sadly, there is a record of Steelers wide receivers leaving the building and going crazy. So you hope that that kind of downside doesn't show up. But I think George Pickens can absolutely emerge, maybe not as a tier 1 CeeDee Lamb tier type of wide receiver, but can he kind of, let's just say he does hit the market and Dallas can't afford him because he has a big year. Could he be someone that we're talking about kind of in that Terry McLaurin, DJ Moore category of true do-it-all number 1 wide receivers that maybe aren't quite as dynamic as the top 4 or 5 type of guys. I really think that's in there for George Pickens if he can stay focused. There's been a aspect of inconsistency in his game that now in a contract year, he's going to have to lock in, and that's no guarantee. But, even if he is just what he was in Pittsburgh with a little bit of inconsistency in there and a little bit of lack of focus at times, I still think this is a setup that's going to work damn well for him. Very excited to see this duo, needless to say. There's not as much to say about the rest of this group. There are some other targets to throw the ball to here that now that you have George Pickens as your number 2 target, everybody kind of gets pushed down the pecking order in a way that's, better for their talents filling into those roles. Whereas last year, basically all these guys were here and had to be more than they are going to have to be this year. Like, for example, Jalen Tolbert had to be their wide receiver 2 last year. That wasn't great. Jake Ferguson, granted he missed some time, kind of had to be the number 2 most targeted off player in this offense. Now he can be number 3, for example. So everybody kind of falls down in a way that by upgrading at wide receiver 2, you're also upgrading your wide receiver 3 and your, target number 3 in Jake Ferguson. Anyway, you get what I'm saying, but Jalen Tolbert's a nice player. I actually think he showed some nice stuff last year. I didn't quite put the up arrow on him because he has a redundant skill set with George Pickens, and I just don't think, as long as everybody's healthy, that he's going to have a big opportunity to showcase his talents and kind of emerge as more of a quality starting wide receiver. Maybe he's a guy that either the Cowboys bring him back when they maybe lose George Pickens and then he can really break through in 2026, or he's a guy that a sneaky GM and a good scout says, hey, this guy can play. Let's give him an opportunity. And, maybe in 2026 he can break through, but he is very much a poor man's George Pickens. He wins a lot of tough catches as a boundary wide receiver. He's not the best athlete. He doesn't run the best routes. He doesn't even have nearly the run after catch ability of a George Pickens. So he's not necessarily a dynamic player. I never really was. That's why he ends up going in the 3rd round. But I did head into last year with some pretty serious doubts about if he was going to even emerge as how I view him today, as kind of a solid, adequate kind of 3rd wide receiver to have. And he did just have some impressive games and made some really tough catches, got back to doing what he did in college that made him an intriguing draft prospect. Not expecting a ton of production from Jalen Tolbert, but it is nice that he's there. But then you got Jake Ferguson, who, frankly, we could have discussed before Jalen Tolbert. He's certainly going to see more targets than Jalen Tolbert. Maybe we'll see even more targets than George Pickens. I don't think he outproduces Pickens in terms of yards. But Jake Ferguson is exactly what the Cowboys need him to be, and he is a contributor here. He is perfect for a lot of the quick game stuff that they do run with Dak Prescott, kind of reading out those zones like a quarterback, sitting down in the soft spots, being in the right place at the right time, a secure pair of hands underneath. And then Jake Ferguson is also pretty sneaky after the catch as well. That's something I really liked about him coming out of Wisconsin. He's also heading into a contract year. I think the likely scenario here is they're going to have to let some guys go, and they like Luke Schoonmaker, 2nd round pick from a couple years ago. We're probably also going to see Jake Ferguson hit the market, but again, we got these guys here this year. Let's enjoy it. And now that he gets to be the, quote unquote receiver 3 instead of the receiver 2, very healthy role for him. I think the next member in this pecking order to discuss would be Kevontae Turpin, who actually last year had to go out, run some routes. He showed some exciting plays down the field even. I think more realistically, he settles back into more of a gadget wide receiver role. I mean, he's just so small. He is 153 pounds at 5'9". It's pretty unheard of, right? But he can separate and actually has some hands, and he's obviously dynamic after the catch. They will utilize him in gadget plays, and he is a threat. Like, you want to make sure you're aware if he's getting the football, because as we'll see later, he's one of the premium just ball carriers in the league in terms of big play threat ability. But as a full-time do-it-all wide receiver, less practical, but he will get in the mix, and especially because Jalen Tolbert is so redundant with George Pickens, that's another reason Tolbert probably won't produce a whole lot, is because Turpin will be in there at times as a slot guy or as the third wide receiver. So expect kind of a rotation there between those two guys. Then we can probably talk about these running backs if we're going about this kind of going down the pecking order here. I would imagine a split between Javonte Williams and their rookie, Jaden Blue. Javonte Williams would be the guy with more of the pass blocking background, who has produced catching dump offs and doing the check and release game. More of the heady player at this point in time as the veteran. Hasn't quite been what he once was, though, in terms of certainly explosiveness, but even missed tackle force rate has gone way down for him. We'll discuss him more with the backfield breakdown, but I do think Javonte plays a good bit, and for the Jaden Blue fantasy truthers out there, I'm not really on board with you guys there because I do think Javonte is going to be out there to protect Dak Prescott and pass block in a way that I don't think Jaden Blue can hold up right now, especially as a rookie, but maybe ever. He's just not the biggest guy. Blue is explosive and has some receiving chops. They can find creative ways to get him the ball, but even then, they're going to take a lot of those looks and give them to Kevontae Turpin. So I've seen a lot of Jaden Blue fantasy hype. I think a large part of that is that these running backs just are not good. But I just wasn't really high on Jaden Blue's prospects as a ball carrier either. We're putting the cart before the horse a little bit because we have the backfield segment coming up here. But yeah, if they do want to throw the ball to Jaden Blue, he's got explosiveness and could carve out a larger role in time. But I just want to say, like, I'm not quite on the Jaden Blue gets a ton of production this year train like some people are. I think his stat line probably looks something more like 25 catches for 250 yards, you know. But he is there. Then we're getting really into backup territory. So let's bounce back to the depth at wide receiver, where you have Jonathan Mingo, Jalen Brooks, Ryan Flournoy, all kind of competing for your fifth and sixth wide receiver spots. I still can't believe they traded a fourth round pick for Jonathan Mingo. That is just crazy and a big part of my cold open, where I was joking about this team just bringing in a bunch of failed high draft picks for other teams. Mingo's a very frustrating player. He has the traits, but his hands are super inconsistent, and he's one of these guys that just never seems to be in the right place at the right time in terms of timing routes and being a trustworthy target, working back to the quarterback, working with the quarterback in scramble drill. It's just, he doesn't seem to be a very high awareness wide receiver, if you will. Then you got Jalen Brooks, who's kind of a poor man's Jalen Tolbert with everything we said about him and kind of winning contested catches. Ryan Flournoy is still fascinating to me. He played a little bit at the ass end of last season and made some catches. He's a physically talented wide receiver. When I got to see him up close and personal at the Senior Bowl, I had no idea who he was wearing. Was it like a Southeast Missouri State helmet or whatever it was? But it was a red and white helmet, and I was like, wow, I didn't realize Julio Jones was at the Senior Bowl. He's got that same build, which he's just jacked at like 6'2", 200 pounds or so. But yeah, he's an interesting athlete at least. Jalen Cropper's kind of a slot backup that honestly you don't really have a true slot wide receiver other than CeeDee Lamb who does a lot of that stuff from the slot. There's a world where Jalen Cropper makes this team because he can do a little bit of something that these other receivers don't. Then you got Paris Campbell, Kelvin Harmon from Once Upon a Time. It's a fascinating group of wide receivers, 4, 5, and 6. Then at tight end, Luke Schoonmaker. I don't know how much 12 personnel the Cowboys really want to run. Last year, they were 29th in the entire NFL in terms of running 12 personnel. Part of that was Jake Ferguson was beat up at times, but it just, going off of memory recall, watching the Cowboys over the years, and then now just kind of confirming that with looking it up from last season at least. I feel like this is mostly an 11 personnel football team, and they do have a fullback as well that they like to use, Hunter Lupke. The Cowboys ran the 7th most 21 personnel. So if you're talking about Schoonmaker and Ferguson being out there together, it'll happen occasionally, but not very often. So as long as Ferguson is healthy, I think Schoonmaker kind of gets put on the back burner. But I do think if you're in dynasty leagues, Schoonmaker is fascinating. I wasn't the biggest fan of when they drafted him in the second round because I do like Jake Ferguson. That was really my main criticism of that. That and the fact that he was 25 when they drafted him, so he's already 27 years old. But he is talented and coming along, and he made some catches last year that stood out to me. He's got some speed. So if they're going to let Jake Ferguson go, just as they did the year before, a couple years ago, letting Dalton Schultz go and handing those keys to Jake Ferguson, they're kind of getting a pipeline going here with these guys. So if you're in a dynasty league, he's someone to target for next year for sure. But I don't think we see too much Schoonmaker this year as long as Ferguson's healthy. And then Brevin Spanford, big-bodied, kind of the perfect tight end 3, just for what he is. 6'7", 270 pounds. Bring him in on goal line, use him down in the red zone. It's a healthy tight end room. I like what they have there, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's all they keep because, again, they do keep a fullback as well. As far as the remaining running backs, I think it's going to be Javonte and Jaden Blue. Miles Sanders is comparable to Javonte Williams in the receiving game. Deuce Vaughn, once upon a time, was hyped up for his receiving chops, but he hasn't really stuck in the league. And then they also have Phil Maffa, who we'll talk about here in just a second with the backfield breakdown. But there is your group of weapons, the highest ranking group for this team. And I am excited to watch this passing game. Man, I really am. But it does start to go downhill a little bit with this team as we continue to go through the roster, especially as we transition to this backfield. Before I reveal the ranking there, let's talk about all of the offseason changes they did make. So they let Rico Dowdle go, who actually ran for 1,000 yards last year behind what is not a bad run blocking unit. But they kind of, like I felt watching the tape, reviewed it and said, we don't need Rico Dowdle. He's a solid back. He's probably not someone we expect to run for 1,000 yards every year, but decent vision. He's an NFL caliber back, but I can't really slam the Cowboys for not extending Rico Dowdle, and definitely Zeke Elliott at this stage of his career. I understand them letting what they had in the backfield go, but the kind of dart throws they took in a league where it's not that hard to find like starting caliber running backs in what was a ridiculously deep draft for running backs. The fact that they actually downgraded, in my opinion, at least slightly, if not more than that. I mean, they go get Javonte Williams from Denver, who's been a shell of himself for multiple years. Miles Sanders, who we saw what happened in Carolina after he left the dream situation of running behind that Eagles offensive line. And then Jaden Blue, who we've already hinted at a little bit in the 5th round out of Texas, an undersized receiving back. And Phil Maffa, a goal line specialist out of Clemson. I'm just kind of left scratching my head here. It's just like, it can't be that hard to get something more exciting here, can it? So with that, the Cowboys do rank 32nd in the league at running back for me with a D+ grade. I don't even know that they're going to get what they got last year in Rico Dowdle from this group. It's really weird. On the plus side, I guess it makes everything we said about the passing game with those receivers and Dak Prescott more exciting because I don't think this team's going to move the ball on the ground all that well. But let's go through these guys a little bit more in depth. Like Javonte Williams, as I said, a shell of himself the last couple of years, a lot of injuries, and he doesn't have the burst. He's not making defenders miss nearly at the clip that he did coming into the league. That was always Javonte Williams' thing, was contact balance and broken tackles. He had one of the best seasons at North Carolina coming out that PFF has ever charted, and he was good in that category in the first year with Denver. But yeah, injuries and lack of efficiency. And it's not like last year they had a bad offensive line. Denver's offensive line was one of the best in the league, and he just didn't produce to the point that he got kind of benched at the end of the year. And it's not just the reduction in his physical talents because of those injuries, but because he's not able to create so much out in space, and when he gets caught in the backfield, you're really starting to realize that he doesn't have good vision, and he bounces runs outside. He's late to see holes develop. And that to me is like the defining aspect where you're downgrading from Rico Dowdle, because like Rico Dowdle doesn't have explosiveness, doesn't make a lot of defenders miss, but he does at least consistently get what's blocked up. Well, Javonte doesn't have the physical tools he once did. He's probably comparable to Rico Dowdle in terms of juice and making guys miss, but you're going to have well-blocked runs that Javonte gets 1 or 2 yards out of, or -4 yards out of, and it's infuriating, and that's why Sean Payton benched him last year. So for him to be the lead back they go with is very suspect. Then you have Miles Sanders, who has very similar criticisms. I think Miles Sanders still has more juice in the tank. He is a very good athlete. But once he got removed from Philadelphia, where it was basically just like, hey, you're going to have a wide open hole to run through, go explode into it. Once that situation was removed from him, he is another one of these backs that couldn't find a hole in a Dunkin' Donuts. And we saw that in the first year in Carolina, especially when the offensive line struggled. He was unwatchable at times, not to mention the fumbles in just the worst of spots. So he's got to take better care of the football there. But I will at least give Miles Sanders this. Last year, when the run blocking was much better in Carolina, he was at least watchable. And he did have some runs. For those that know me, I was a big Panthers fan. I was watching every Panthers game diligently, and he would come in and actually run with some FU pissed off energy. And I didn't quite have the balls to call out a Miles Sanders reemergence, another breakout here in Dallas. But I will at least say this, for whatever it's worth. Give me Miles Sanders in fantasy football over Javonte Williams, and Jaden Blue for that matter. If you put a gun to my head and said, which one of these running backs is going to have a top 30 RB finish this season, I would have to bet on Miles Sanders, at least because of some of the flashes last year, making me think maybe there's a little bit something in there still. They seem to be leaning towards Javonte Williams for now. But I think, I don't know, man. I can't get too excited about either of these guys, but that would be my kind of take out of this group. I think ultimately both guys will struggle, and that gun to your head scenario is still talking about a top 30 fantasy running back finish, which is not asking a whole lot. Both of these backs are really going to struggle with vision and leave you frustrated at times. And that's why, like, I also just can't get excited about Jaden Blue, man. Like, yeah, he might get those opportunities because these other backs are so bad. But do I think Jaden Blue is a talented enough running back that he just takes this backfield by storm and has enough runs where you're like, okay, great. Like, we found our guy. We're going to give him anything more than 10 touches a game? No, Jaden Blue, he had horrible vision at Texas. He was basically an athlete playing the running back position. I like the way he can catch the ball and have some explosive plays on design touches and, some gimmick plays and stuff. But asking him to read out an under center run game at the NFL level, I do not expect that he's going to do that. He doesn't have the size and power. I was not a fan of him being the guy that they wanted to put into this backfield and give a chance to, especially because, like, Devin Neal was still there, dude. Like, come on, you put Devin Neal here, or take a chance on like a Damian Martinez out of Miami. Like, I really hated that draft pick, man. And I know some Cowboys fans are excited about Jaden Blue. I would love to be wrong, but I just do not see it. I just don't. After that, I mean, Phil Maffa is a 230-pound goal line back. Probably has the best vision out of anybody in this backfield, not named Deuce Vaughn, but Deuce Vaughn can't do anything about it, even if he did see it, because he has no physical traits to speak of at all, and he has not been able to translate his game to the next level. So this is a pretty egregiously terrible running back group. It's one of the worst running back rooms I've ever seen since we've been doing this. It should not be that hard to find capable running backs in the modern NFL. And it's very rare that I sit here in this segment and say, I worry if they're going to be able to run the ball. Like we might have groups that rank 29th, 30th even, but I'm still like, yeah, this is still an NFL caliber running back because there's a million starting running backs in the NFL. Somehow I think the Cowboys managed to find none of them here. So I'm expecting a lot of passing in Dallas this year, needless to say. Honestly, one of the best runners that they have on this team is Dak Prescott. The Cowboys do get a decent multiplier from the QB here. They rank inside the top 16 for that little boost that we give these teams if they get contributions from the quarterback. Now, Dak has been getting beat up a little bit more in recent years, so maybe they try to stay away from this a little more. But when, in the past, they have used him as a rushing threat at the goal line on read options to keep defenses honest, and he's effective at it. He's big, he's got some acceleration, so he gets a little bit of a boost there, and then maybe they could even use Joe Milton a little bit to help out their run game if they want to. But let's go ahead and move on and talk about this offensive line. Let's look at their offseason changes here. So Zach Martin does retire. It makes sense. He clearly was not the old Zach Martin, and he missed about half their games last year, so it was time. He is a loss, was still a starting caliber player, but not the end of the world. Again, he missed a lot of time last year and wasn't what he used to be. They're replacing that core player in the first round with Tyler Booker, which I am a fan of Tyler Booker. We'll talk about him. So not a bad pivot to make if Martin's going to retire. And then they bring in Robert Jones, who started a lot of games in Miami, and then Johnny Cornelius, a 6th-round pick out of Oregon. So some additions there. I did ultimately say neutral, at least for now, though if Booker's good right away in his first season, I don't know that he'll be better than Zach Martin was even in that final season, but if Booker could play the whole year at that level, that would potentially be an upgrade. But I just left it at neutral, probably just out of respect for Zach Martin, who's going to go into the Hall of Fame here probably in about 5 years. But let's go through this group. I will say this, if the Cowboys are going to be able to run the ball at all this year, it will luckily be because of their offensive line, which is the most important part of running the football. They do have a pretty good run blocking group here where they, even though they are a younger unit, they do rank just about top 10 for me, 8th to 11th in run blocking with a B grade there. And that shouldn't come as too big of a surprise because Rico Dowdle did run for over 1,000 yards here last year. Like, this is a group that can move you off the ball. They've got a lot of talent there. Now, it is one of the more split or polarizing groups in that their pass blocking ranking is very poor, 29th to 31st with a C- grade for pass blocking. So they are very split in this sense. This is a people moving unit, not necessarily a pass protecting unit. So those rankings average out to make the Cowboys the 22nd overall offensive line, though just like we did with the Steelers deep dive, they do have 4 players with the arrow pointing up on them. And because of that, that does make this unit a true wild card pivotal factor for this team this season, because if they can get the right development here, hopefully helped by the addition of Clayton Adams as the offensive coordinator / overqualified offensive line coach, then yeah, this could be obviously, like a top 10 unit because they're already close to that with run blocking. If the pass blocking can be pretty solid, then yeah, it's not going to be too hard for this group to climb up these rankings. So there is some excitement with this unit. It's just they've got a wide range of outcomes. And a huge part of that is Tyler Guyton in year 2, who might be the biggest wild card X factor player who's going to determine the ultimate success of this football team. 1st round pick in 2023, plugged into a critical left tackle position here, all over the map, mostly bad with the occasional flash in his rookie season, which was not a surprise given what he was as a prospect. This was not the Tyler Smith story where I was critical of Tyler Smith when they drafted him in the 1st round. I thought he would struggle early, and he was fantastic out the gate. I questioned them again when they took Tyler Guyton, and Cowboys fans said, well, you said that about Tyler Smith. You're obviously going to be wrong again. Well, this was a situation where, yeah, Tyler Guyton was not ready to start at left tackle in his rookie season, and you're hoping a guy that is very athletic, does have the traits to be a franchise left tackle, can start to put everything together. And that's what it's all about. I mean, from his feet to his hands, his technique is just inconsistent. This is a position where you want repeatable mechanics, and he has struggled to even get that baseline. And then it's all about building skill up from that. So there's nothing about his anchor or his athleticism or his size or his length that I can be critical of. It is all technique with him. And it hurts him in both phases, pass blocking and run blocking, where you will basically see the occasional flash. You know, there was a clip from like training camp where he locked down Micah Parsons, and it's like, yeah, if he stumbles into the right technique on one individual play, it's all going to come together and it's going to look really good. But it's putting the whole thing together consistently that we just have to see from him. So right now he is at best a replacement level tackle that should be a backup in most situations, but year 2 is going to be big for him. If he plays like he did last year, you would be worried about this spot and probably looking for a different answer there and wondering if he maybe needs to take a seat or slide into guard, or, you know, kind of like the Evan Neal story for the New York Giants, although Guyton fortunately wasn't drafted quite as high as Neal. But yeah, there's major worries for Tyler Guyton. I do still put the up arrow on him because he's got a great coach now in Clayton Adams, and that's really what he needs, is just technique and coaching, and we'll see. But then at left guard, Tyler Smith, who is, unless I'm snubbing someone, I would say the 4th best guard in the NFL. We've kind of had this discussion where right now I see, in many ways, a 3-way tie for who the best guard in the NFL is between Joe Thuney, who's the best pass blocking guard in the league. You got Chris Lindstrom, is the best run blocking guard in the league, but he's actually just kind of like good as a pass blocker, but not great. And then you have Quentin Nelson, who's still doing it at an incredibly high level, who's probably just like top 5 in both categories, run blocking and pass blocking. I don't know that Tyler Smith has fully established the consistency of those 3 players, but I think I would put him at guard 4. And he's a guy that is really good in both categories. I think he is already a top 3 run blocking guard, though, and pass blocking, he's like top 10. So he's very good in both categories. But from a traits perspective, he is unbelievable. I mean, he is, it's so hard to say close to Trent Williams, because Trent Williams is going to go down as one of the best linemen to ever play football. But the fact that it's at least a thought that crosses your mind when you watch Tyler Smith, that says a lot. So in terms of like get off and moving guys off the ball and climbing to the second level, he can do really, really special stuff. And, you know, there's just been like little moments where he lets a guy cross his face or second guesses himself, or he does kind of, you know, get a little over aggressive and get his head over his skis. And he has like the occasional lapse in the run game, but it's been cleaned up. You know, that kind of stuff has been cleaned up year after year after year. He's been developing in both pass blocking and run blocking. His trajectory is still very much pointing up. He's a monster, man. You feel great about him at left guard, and what you don't feel great about is that he is going to also be very, very expensive for this team. Yet another reason you kind of question if this team's going to be able to keep George Pickens, because we just saw what Trey Smith got in Kansas City, like $24 million as the top paid guard in the league. Tyler Smith is pretty close to Trey Smith, but probably more consistent as a pass blocker. So you know he's getting that contract very soon. He does still have a 5th-year option next season, but as we know, these guys like to get that bag locked up. So another player here that is heading towards a massive deal that hopefully Dallas doesn't drag on too long like they've done with so many of these other guys. But yeah, he's an exciting conversation. Then you get back to kind of these young developing players. I like Cooper Beebe. He moved into center last year. Evaluated him at guard at Kansas State and loved his tape. An ass kicker in the run game. Not the most fluid of athletes at 6'4", 335 pounds. But he can at least move a little bit. And when you get him as a puller, he's a ton of fun. But it's not like they have to do that a ton from him as a center. It's more just leveraging that nose tackle, creating drive off the line of scrimmage, we're seeing more and more of these big centers in the league, and for an inside run focused team like Dallas is, it makes a lot of sense. And that's a lot of strength and mass and power between him and Tyler Smith, and now Tyler Booker too, to drive guys off the ball. So I love what he does in the run game. I think he has a chance to be one of the better run blocking centers in the league. Pass protection, you don't want him necessarily left on an island against even like a blitzing linebacker or like some of these quick hitting interior rushers. Like he just, sliding left to right isn't his best strength. So you will see him lose at times, but he held his own as a 3rd round rookie. And I said it when they drafted him that I would bet on him being the better lineman between him and Tyler Guyton, because I want to say they traded down, got the 3rd round pick that they ended up using on Cooper Beebe, and then took Tyler Guyton. So I was like, well, I didn't like the Tyler Guyton pick, but at least they traded down and added Cooper Beebe in the mix. That's kind of all playing out right now. We'll see how it ultimately ages. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Cooper Beebe, and he's on the right track. Just needs to keep proving it and getting better, because he certainly wasn't perfect in his rookie season, but you really liked what you saw. Then you get Tyler Booker at right guard in the 1st round. I actually liked this draft pick. Booker ended up getting a lot of hate because even myself, among other people in the draft world, were sharing clips about like just how poor he is at moving out in space. And I had a tweet that was like basically saying, why do people keep mocking the Dolphins to draft Tyler Booker? The Dolphins, as we discussed in their deep dive, they want all athletes on their offensive line. Hence why they got an athletic Suamataia to be their guard pick in the 2nd round. They want to pull these guys and block wide zone and all this stuff. I was like, any team that wants a lot of reach blocking and athleticism out of their guards, forget about it. With Tyler Booker as a 1st round pick, he's going to have 4th round grades from some teams. He might be even lower than that for some teams, because he does not move in space well at all. But for any sort of inside blocking scheme, or a team that likes to run a lot of power, because he has enough athleticism to at least pull from one B gap to another and block traditional gap power. He can still do that. It's just running tosses with him and wide zone that you're going to have more concerns. But any sort of inside blocking run game, I love Tyler Booker. He's got a ton of power. It's just a rare combination of natural leverage where he's not short, but I want to say he was like 6'3" or so, just off the top of my head, but he had longer arms for a guard and just vice grip hands. So he's just, because he's such a tough natural blocker, he just kind of navigates through traffic, finds a guy's shoulder pads, latches on, and sustains blocks exceptionally well. He doesn't have the best run blocking drive where you want to see him just detonate guys off the line. If that makes sense, like he doesn't have this crazy first step where even big guys, like you still want to have a good get off to generate that initial force, but he does just sustain blocks so well. He doesn't fall off of blocks in the way that so many offensive linemen do. So I like him in the run game, and I think he's even better in pass protection, frankly, where he hardly ever missed a stunt or a blitz. You do not power through this guy, and his hands are excellent. I think his feet are just fine. So I think they picked a very high floor guard. And if Tyler Smith and Tyler Booker are the best guard tandem for the next 10 years, not going to be the least bit surprised. So as long as this scheme is the way it is, I think they found a good one there in Tyler Booker in the teens of the draft. And then Terrence Steele at right tackle. He's a smashing right tackle. Loves to run block. He is just way better moving forward than he is moving backwards. I see this guy make really athletic blocks on the move, driving guys off the ball. He can block any run scheme, in my opinion. But then I see him get into his kick sets, and he just looks uncoordinated and lets guys cross his face, and he struggles to set his feet and block against power rushers. He was better last year than he was in that tragic 2023 season where there was questions if he was even going to be a starter for them in this season after a prove-it year last year, basically. And he settled in and got a little better, but he's still not someone I trust in pass protection. But overall, he is a good right tackle because he's so good in the run game. So you have two really good run blockers. You think Cooper Beebe is going to be pretty damn good too. You think the floor is pretty high on what Booker's going to give you. It makes sense how they're close to top 10 in run blocking, right? But pretty much all these guys other than Tyler Smith have questions in terms of pass protection. Or at least in the case of Tyler Booker, it's like, well, he's a rookie. We're not going to come out and rank him super high there. But a lot of potential, a lot of youth and excitement. And I am excited to see where this goes with these guys. Let's talk about the depth. You have Asim Richards is probably the most fascinating name behind these guys. He would be someone to keep an eye on if Tyler Guyton is just unplayable and this is year 2 of Evan Neal and they need to bench him. Asim Richards actually stepped in at tackle and played pretty damn well from a pass blocking perspective. He's a really nice athlete and someone to keep an eye on as a potential emergency break glass in case of emergency option if Tyler Guyton really does suck. I liked what we saw from him last year, so we'll see there. He's not the biggest guy. He's going to struggle with power at times, but yeah, nice technique, nice athlete. They drafted Johnny Cornelius in the 6th round. I wasn't as big of a fan of him. I just didn't really see the athletic tools for an NFL tackle. We'll see, I guess. Hakeem Adeniji. Really lump him, honestly, in with Sadiq Charles, who's down there as a backup guard as failed mid-round athletic draft and develop picks for other NFL teams that they're bringing in here. Matt Waletzko has hardly played as a day 3 pick from them out of North Dakota a few years ago. So really just Asim Richards is the one tackle backup that I'm interested in. And then they do have some good interior depth. I'll give them that. Brock Hoffman had to play a good bit last year when Zach Martin was injured, and he was okay. Was another solid run blocker in the inside and wasn't a colossal disaster as a pass blocker. So he's a really nice backup to have, frankly. I don't really see a route for playing time for him unless he just wins that center job kind of by surprise, but he can play center or guard, and he's a really nice swing guy to have on the inside. TJ Bass as well stepped in and had to play last year. He blocked his ass off as another big interior guy. Robert Jones played in Miami. I do think the system fits Robert Jones a lot better. He is very much a Tyler Booker build at that large, mauling guard type, but he actually was in Miami, so he had a lot of those struggles that a Tyler Booker maybe would have had in a system like that. So I don't hate bringing in Robert Jones as more of a scheme fit and a potential really nice backup to a Tyler Booker, for example. Nate Thomas, I think, was a 7th round pick for them last year, didn't get on the field, and yeah, that's basically it for the depth. So not bad depth by NFL standards if you have one interesting backup tackle alongside a 6th round pick, and then really 3 interior pieces that can step in and not be the end of the world for you. So that does round out your offensive line and the overall offensive breakdown. So let's do the offensive summary here. So the Cowboys come in as my 17th overall offense, but very split here. 10th in passing game, where this is going to be a borderline prolific passing attack, especially if the pass blocking can just be average. If the pass blocking can just be average here for a Dak Prescott that's, he wants to sit in the pocket. Not a guy that creates a ton if the pass blocking struggles. But if the pass blocking can just be average here, this should be one of the best passing games in the league. And typically the best passing games in the league are going to be playoff contenders, unless you're the Bengals. But the Cowboys do rank 28th for run game. Granted, if you get some real development there and it's just an awesome run blocking unit, they're going to have moderate success on the ground no matter who your running backs are. But man, the Cowboys are really pushing the limits in terms of the running backs don't matter argument. I think they have gone a little bit too far from the team that drafted Zeke Elliott and paid him way earlier than they should have to like overcorrecting in an era in the NFL where running backs matter more now than they did when they invested in Zeke Elliott. So kind of
not have enough players and will be forfeiting the championship match.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Especially, by the way, when the backs that they do have, the biggest criticism on all three of those guys is vision. If the idea is, as long as you have good run blocking, you can have a back get the most of that run blocking. Well, Rico Dowdle did that, but these backs have horrible vision. So I really question if the run game's going to work. Not a criticism I often have on teams, because I am a believer that run blocking matters, but I think you can understand at least my hesitations there. But let's go over to the defensive side of the ball and see what kind of support Dak Prescott and this passing game are going to get here, starting with the defensive line, and we will take a look at the many offseason changes they made here. So some moving pieces on the interior of the defensive line, nothing worth spending a lot of time on. Linval Joseph out the door, Carlos Watkins out the door. They bring in journeyman, former first-round pick Solomon Thomas, Jay Toya, a 7th-round nose tackle, Tommy Akimbasote, a 7th-round athletic developmental profile, just neutral for me along the interior of the defensive line. A unit that you wish, if you're a Cowboys fan, as we'll see in a second, they did a little bit more there. Definitely a team where staying neutral at interior defensive line is a bad thing. But on the edge, I did say upgraded. A lot of different moving pieces here. So Chauncey Golston, who did play 72% of their snaps last year, they had to lean on him heavily with all the injuries they had last year. He heads to the Giants. That's a moderate loss. He's a nice backup edge. But DeMarcus Lawrence, big name. I think he was a bigger addition for Seattle than he is a loss for Dallas, at least compared to last year's team, because DeMarcus Lawrence went down for the season in week 4 last year. So he was hardly a part of this team last year. Hard to call that much of a loss for this Cowboys team. And then Carl Lawson as well, minor contributor. He's also out the door. But some additions to this edge group. Sam Williams might be the biggest of which, I guess to be determined there. I don't even know where Cowboys fans are at on their expectations for Sam Williams, but this was kind of a sneaky injury last year. Or totally a sneaky injury. I feel like nobody talked about the fact that Sam Williams was heading into a big year for Dallas last year. Was going to be year 3 for him as a 2nd-round pick in 2022, and he goes down with an ACL tear in like July. So they're expecting him back heading into a contract year now, and we know that contract year can be a motivating factor. So he's going to be in the mix here. I think that's a nice addition for this team. And then Donovan Ezeraku as well, a 2nd-round pick out of Boston College. They also bring Dante Fowler back after yet another nice year for the Commanders last year. And then yet another former 1st-round pick getting another opportunity here, Peyton Turner, who was a total bust for the New Orleans Saints, fills in some depth here. So let's take a look at this defensive line. And it is another very split, call it polarizing group in terms of the rankings. They are inside the top 4 for me for pass rush. I think a lot of this team's ability to get after the quarterback. They rank 2nd to 4th there with an A- grade. However, D-line run defense, 32nd, dead last in the league. You know the old bit of like, could you get a yard on an NFL defense? Well, if you were to go for it, this would be the team to try against. We'll get into the interior D-line especially and their deficiencies in terms of size and run defense capabilities, but let's at least start on a positive note with this edge group that is one of the best edge units in the league. And that's going to happen really anytime you have Micah Parsons. He alone makes your pass rush so prolific. And he... You know, not only is he one of these edge rushers that if he gets one-on-one, he's going to win it almost every time, but even then he will split chip blocks and double team opportunities. Like, he is obviously one of those defensive player of the year, elite of the elite, one of the best overall football players in the entire game. But the way they're able to use him, he almost breaks some of the rules because, you know, like a TJ Watt or a Myles Garrett or any of these top true edge guys, you can just chip them off the edge and try to game plan around them. Well, the Cowboys have the extra added ability to just move Micah Parsons around, use him as a blitzing linebacker, bring in Ezraku and Sam Williams and Dante Fowler as your edge rushers, and then you could just line up Micah Parsons over the center, and you can't really double team that. So he almost has his own little cheat code factor about him because he's just so unblockable really everywhere he lines up as, but he is by far the best blitzing linebacker in the league with the way he can cross a center's face with the combination of strength and quickness that he has. So he is just so special. He alone, like it's hard to imagine any defensive line with Micah Parsons on it not being a top 10 pass rush in the NFL. So he's a huge core part of the high ranking that we have on this Cowboys pass rush. But he does have a legitimate number 2 next to him in Osa Odigizua. Let's just keep this conversation focused on the pass rush. We mentioned the run defense has some issues that we'll have to circle back to, and Osa is their best run defending interior player. But even then, he is an undersized guy, 6'2", 280 pounds. But I do think we need to mention him second because he finished last year 5th among interior defensive linemen in the league in pressures. He finishes with 60 pressures. He earns rightfully the contract extension here, getting that sort of number 2 defensive lineman money. I just off the top of my head, like I just saw George Karlaftis came in at like $22 million a year. I want to say Osa was right around that mark, if not a little bit cheaper. Yeah, 4 years, $80 million. I had to check that, but this team does have another guy that can legitimately win one-on-one reps, that can capitalize on the fact that you are going to consistently slide your line and your protections towards Micah Parsons, and you can start to line up Osa Odigizua in advantageous situations, really knowing where those slides and double teams are going to go towards. Especially, I mean, like I said, like even if you want to line Micah Parsons up and try to double team him if he's going to rush from the middle of the offensive line, then yeah, especially Osa knows he's getting a one-on-one. But yeah, he's got rip moves. He's got some power. He can just run across your face. He has an awesome first step and everything you could look for to be an effective number 2 caliber pass rusher in the NFL and genuinely like a top 10 pass rushing interior defensive lineman in the league. So he kind of seals the deal for the most part on this being inside the top 5 for the pass rush rankings. Just to have those two guys together is an outstanding building block to work around the rest of this group. But then you factor in some intrigue with the edge group, and if some things can go right with the edge group outside of Micah Parsons, you're really in business, especially not to beat a dead horse, but the fact that 3 of these guys will be on the field at once, where you might even take a Mazzie Smith off the field for some of your dime looks, rush Micah Parsons over the guard in the center, and then bring in Ezraku or Sam Williams or Dante Fowler off the edge. And you could really start with any 3 of those guys as the quote-unquote best edge 2 or the quote-unquote starting edge 2. It's going to be a complete rotation. All of these guys, all the way down to Marshawn Nealand in year 2 here, who's more of an early down presence. All of these guys are going to play probably 400, 500, 600 snaps. But I did put Donovan Ezraku up there first because he's the one you're probably most excited to see what he can bring to the table as the exciting second-round rookie. And a guy that a lot of draft analysts expected to go in the top 20 of the draft. I was much closer to where he got drafted as an early second-round caliber guy, and he ends up going right in that territory with the 44th pick. I see so much, not to scout the helmet, but Harold Landry, who has been a really good number 2 edge rusher throughout his career. And that to me is a guy that you take maybe very back end of the first or early second round, as Harold Landry went. Not so much inside the top 20 and someone that can become more of a true number 1 for you. That's more of the territory I'm drafting edges inside the top 20. But still, they don't need Ezraku to be a number 1. They need him to be a 2B or a 3 here. And can he be that within his rookie season? Yeah, absolutely. Now, he has to prove it here as a second-round pick, but there's legitimate excitement for him to come in and be a 40 pressure, 6-7 sack type of impact in his rookie season. And especially because he is such a polished player. He has no mistakes about how he wins. He's got a ton of bend and he's great with his hands. He's really quick. He's got a little bit of power in there. I don't think he's going to have the type of power to consistently overtake NFL tackles, but I think it's enough that you at least have to respect it, and then he can win with his bend and his quickness. I just don't see a guy with incredible traits to be this dominant NFL pass rusher, but for what they need him to be as a second-round pick, I think he can provide a ton of value to this team, and I think there's room for him to improve and prove to be an adequate early down run defender, just as Harold Landry himself did over the years as a bit more of an undersized guy. So I like the draft pick, excited to see what he can be in year two, and obviously if he can hit early, the Cowboys could get into the conversation for who's going to be the best pass rush in the NFL this year. But after that, I think we should talk about Sam Williams, who is also a major wild card here. He is a very capable number 3 edge rusher for pass rush downs. But coming off the ACL injury, can he get and stay healthy? How much do they still believe in him here? He's just a guy that you just haven't heard any buzz really for him. So he's kind of got to recapture that playing time, frankly, and the momentum. But a ton of traits. He was definitely better than I expected he would be coming out of college. He hasn't really fully tapped into all of his physical traits to be a star player, but yeah, someone that can, again, get you somewhere in that 40 to 50 pressure range and impact quarterbacks with his speed and bend around the edge. And he does have the ability to convert speed to power. He's got the raw traits to win. He's an even traitier player than Donovan Ezeraku. He's just not maybe as tactical as an Ezeraku is even as a rookie. But yeah, we'll see what they can get from him. They don't need him necessarily, but hey, if Sam Williams gets a best case scenario and Donovan Ezeraku hits as a rookie, then like I said, you bring those two guys in, they can scream off the edge. You got Osa and Micah that can wreck on the inside. So much potential there. Dante Fowler, you much more know what he is, but he raises the floor of what you need from these other edge rushers. He did end up with a 50 pressure, 11 sack season for the Commanders last year. Kind of a career year for him in many regards. He's not the most efficient pass rusher or anything like that, but as a 31-year-old veteran that's kind of consistently produced as a number 3 edge, it's a nice enough signing to raise the floor when you do have a rookie coming in and another guy coming off of injury. And even Marshawn Kneeland, who had a very disappointing rookie season, kind of, on and off the field. It feels like Cowboys fans could probably clear up in the comments kind of what injuries he was going through and all that stuff. But yeah, just not a factor in his rookie season, but another second-round pick in this unit. Someone that I think can play a core role for this team as an early down run defender. All these guys, Ezeraku, Fowler, Williams, are pass rush forward players. You want someone that can help you get into pass rushing situations and set a hard edge and play some of those dirty downs reps that no one's going to write home about, but are necessary here. And that, I think, is the hope for Marshawn Kneeland in year 2, to do a lot of that stuff that DeMarcus Lawrence has done for them over the years, to do a lot of the stuff that Chauncey Golston had to do for this team last year. In many ways, Kneeland is as critical as these other guys. I think he can do it. He was really good coming out of Western Michigan and so physical. I think the rookie season wasn't meant to be for him. And I would love to get some added feedback from Cowboys fans if you're, comfortable with Kneeland getting more playing time and settling in as that early down workhorse for this team. They did bring in Peyton Turner, who could maybe do some of that stuff, but he wasn't really good at that in New Orleans. He does have the size. Technically, he's one of these kind of big, oversized edge, undersized interior guys with a lot of athleticism. I would imagine, they're going to throw him out there to play the run as an edge on early downs and hopefully can at least put that size to good use. But that's probably your 6 edge rushers. Tyrus Wheat maybe makes the team, but it's a good group and a ton of potential to be one of the best groups of edge rushers in the entire league. Interior wise, look, we talked about Osa. I feel like, we hit home on him. He's a pass rush oriented 3 technique that can make some splash plays against the run, and he is their best interior run defender, at least in terms of overall impact, but he cannot hold the line of scrimmage all that well, cannot two gap, cannot play the nose tackle. And here we go. Year 3, they're asking Mazi Smith to do that again. He has been one of the biggest surprising busts of recent drafts. I thought he was a high floor Michigan nose tackle. This is the type of player that the Dallas Cowboys would go trading for after this season. He's been so bad. I wonder where that leaves Mazi Smith if he doesn't develop this year. But I would love to put the up arrow in Mazi Smith and say he's going to figure it out. I thought that was going to happen last year, and the pad level was still bad. I don't know what the answer is at this point. There's been discussions about his weight balancing all over the place. I just don't know. He could just be one of these guys that just isn't motivated. I hate to question guys' work ethic like that and stuff, but when you have the traits that you have and you're this bad against the run, it's like, what is going on here? So he is going to play because he has to play. All of these other guys are super undersized other than Jay Toya, a 7th round rookie. This reminds me of what we said with the running back. It's like, is there really nobody else out there that can two gap that you can find and stick in here? Like, come on. Solomon Thomas is a good backup to Osa Odigizua. I think he might also play some of that early down edge stuff. I wouldn't hate that, to be honest. But we know what Solomon Thomas is at this point in his career. He's a movable backup flex piece. Jay Toya, I mean, he's interesting for his size, and he just might be a better nose tackle than Mazi Smith. But he's another guy that needs to improve his pad level. He went in the 7th round for a reason, but there's a lot of traits there. I think for a 7th round pick, it was a nice addition, but it's a 7th round pick that they're kind of counting on. Pretty crazy. Tommy Akimisote, I think, will be a true developmental role here. Very similar body types to Osa and Solomon Thomas, so good guys to learn from. We'll check back with him in a year. Ernest Brown, a hybrid end. Maybe he plays some early down edge stuff for them. Perion Winfrey as well, a athletic, once previously hyped up prospect that has had off-field concerns. I don't know that he'll make the team, but if he does, well, let's just say it might be better if he doesn't make the team because he's so bad against the run. He is a guy that I'm not afraid to question his effort against the run. There have been some hilarious reps of him getting walked back in the inside run game. So yeah, this is the worst run defending defensive line in the league, which is not what Cowboys fans want to hear. This has been really the narrative on this Cowboys team in previous seasons, where they run into run-heavy teams and they're able to keep their pass rushers at bay and just dictate terms and force this team out of the game script that they're comfortable living in. And those have been the games, like the Packers playoff games, seemingly when they play the Niners, where this defense gets away from what they're good at and games get away from them. And you're definitely worried about that happening in certain matchups. Yet again, it's pretty crazy that this team hasn't been able to pivot off of that. So it's a major concern, but at the same time, maybe Matt Eberflus can help out in that regard. Having a bad D-line in a run defense perspective is something he was used to in Chicago, and they got better production there, certainly. If they can just get into third down more consistently, this team can cause as much chaos as just about anybody in the league. But let's go to the linebackers here, where you're going to continue to have some questions here, but let's look at their offseason changes here. So they do say goodbye to Eric Kendricks. I can't fault them for that, getting up there in age. He was adequate, so a moderate loss, but nothing you're too worried about. In terms of additions, though, Kenneth Murray, yet another former first-round pick bust that this team acquires. Honestly, the better addition, in my opinion, is the guy that may or may not play as much, and that is Jack Sanborn, who's shown more as an undrafted rookie in Matt Eberflus's defense in Chicago than Kenneth Murray maybe ever has as a former first-round pick. And then Shamar James, a undersized fifth-round pick out of Florida in the kind of developmental category there. So I ended up saying slightly downgraded at linebacker just because I don't know that they necessarily replenished what they had in Eric Kendricks, who was still okay last year. But let's go through it. So this group has a major wild card factor attached to it, and it is DeMarvion Overshown. So about 2 months ago, even when I first initially put these rankings together, I was under the impression that he was going to miss this entire season. Reports are becoming more optimistic in that he might be available mid-season or week 5-ish. There's even been some hope that maybe he'll have a miracle recovery and can get out there and start practicing maybe by the end of training camp. So things are heading in the right direction with his recovery, which is excellent news for the Dallas Cowboys. But obviously his availability and how healthy he is, where he had a brutal knee injury. I think it was the big three that you can get in a knee injury. He tore all of them. And the Cowboys team doctor at this point is not exactly known for good recoveries. He did Jonathan Brooks' knee injury. I know that. I think he did Savon Revel's knee surgery. Maybe that's unnecessary shade getting thrown at the team doctor. Maybe Cowboys fans are happy that I'm calling that out. But there has been some questions about his talents. And I'm assuming that's who did Overshown's surgery here. But either way, what they get from him could be nothing, or it could be a star linebacker. Because when he played last year in year 2, he was a pleasant surprise for this team. He's not a perfect player. He's still very undersized, still a year 2 linebacker, figuring everything out in terms of read keys and taking the right angles and risk assessment for a guy that is very much a splash play linebacker. But, I mean, he was kind of the team's defensive MVP other than Micah Parsons, making plays left and right, kind of the heartbeat of the defense. And when he went down, it was a big blow to this unit. And he's fun to watch, man. And I really hope he can get back out there, because he really reminds me a lot of Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, where he's probably never going to be a foolproof, perfect LB1 because he is a little smaller in terms of taking on blocks and having that size you look for at this position. But the instincts, the speed, the coverage potential, it's all in there for him to be an ascending star for this player. It's just what we get from him, nobody knows. You could not possibly know that with the recovery there. And on top of the recovery, development. What sort of development do we see in year 3? You're hopeful that it would be there, but it's, when you're coming back from an injury, that can impact your development too. He's also a huge impact as a blitzing threat. I don't imagine they'll blitz quite as much in Eberflus's defense, but he did have 20 pressures and 5 sacks on just 74 blitz attempts last season. So hopefully they can get him back. If they do, this linebacker ranking will shatter where I have it right now, which is the 29th overall linebacker room, ranking 25th to 27th in coverage and 31st in run defense. Not exactly a great pairing with what was the 32nd best D-line for run defense. But week 1, I fully expect we have here Kenneth Murray and probably a competition, honestly, between Maurice Luafau and Jack Sanborn. Luafau played a good bit for this team last year for a different staff. Sanborn follows Eberflus over. I think Sanborn's a better version of that sort of tough, a little bit bigger, but not as athletic linebacker than a Maurice Luafau, but kind of the same idea there. And let's just stay down this track for convenience sake, and then we'll come back to Kenneth Murray. But I really like Jack Sanborn, man. I hope he wins this job. Nothing against Maurice Luafau, but I see a lot of TJ Edwards in Jack Sanborn's game with the run defense ability. And it was fun to see those guys play next to each other. A pair of former undrafted Wisconsin linebackers that fell because of poor athletic measurables. But he clearly his tape in college was great. Whenever he got on the field for Chicago, which wasn't a lot because they have TJ Edwards and Tremaine Edmonds, but whenever he was out there as a strong side linebacker, weak side linebacker, he made plays and showed up against the run and tackled consistently. I really do think he is the best hope they have from a run defense perspective here. And I think he's just ahead of the 8 ball compared to Maurice Luafau, who's a year 2 player, now has to learn a new system. Jack Sanborn actually doesn't have to learn a new system. He's going to be Eberflus's guy. So other than Overshown, I think Sanborn's the guy you're most excited about in this linebacker room, and it was a really sneaky, cheap addition for this Cowboys team. Unlike Kenneth Murray, not that Murray was expensive, I think they swapped like 7th round picks to go get Kenneth Murray, but that did mean they inherited his bad contract that the Titans gave him. So he is like a $7 million cap hit this year. I certainly would not have made this move if I were Dallas. It's just at some point, you needed to see the development come from Kenneth Murray. And he's been the same guy since he came into the league, where he wants to lean on his athleticism. He's going to kind of take the cheese on play action. He's going to run after pre-snap motion and counter fakes and everything. Like, he's just a see-ball, hit-ball linebacker. He loves to hit, and he's not a bad tackler. If he's developed in any category, he's improved his missed tackle rate by about 2 or 3% the last couple of years, and he was down to 8% last year. So he's at least like good at finishing tackles when he gets there, but he doesn't have a lot of attention to detail in terms of taking the right angles, taking time to understand route combinations and be this thoughtful coverage player. It's just not really there for him. So he's just an athlete that's going to run around and make plays. If Overshown is healthy, I don't want 2 of these guys out there. I think Overshown is a smarter, more thoughtful player than Kenneth Murray, but kind of the same idea where there's not a lot of discipline in your linebacking group between those 2 guys. So I would hope if Overshown can get back out there healthy, we do see Sanborn or Maurice Luafau take a nice step in year 2. I think Luafau was fine as a rookie that had to get kind of flushed into playing time last year. He was a 3rd round pick. That's not nothing. I just don't see a super tradesy player, but he's tough. He had some impressive hits filling into the hole. And like I said, he is, to me, just Jack Sanborn-esque, but not as proven and a little bit more behind the 8 ball compared to Sanborn, who gets to stay in this system. But you kind of have 2 of those guys. Then you got Damone Clark. I still want to believe in Damone Clark, but something's been missing there. He always kind of grades out all right, and he played 830 snaps in 2023. Only missed 5.8% of his tackles that year. Had a couple pass breakups. It's just one of these deals where I don't fully understand what's missing and why the Cowboys don't really like him. I would love to say, hey, keep an eye on Damone Clark in year 4. I think he would definitely fall into the category of your year 4, year 5 breakout candidates for a linebacker prospect that I did like. But for one reason or another, he just hasn't really pulled through in this depth chart where there's been plenty of opportunities to do that. So not necessarily predicting that, at least here in Dallas. Maybe he hits the market and gets a different coaching staff that believes in him, or maybe Matt Eberflus likes what he sees. I guess we'll find out. Shamar James, I wouldn't expect to play much. He's kind of a hedge against DeMarvion Overshown in many ways. Kind of the same idea, that undersized, heat-seeking missile type. Just not quite as fast. Thought he was a bit of a reach in the 5th round, if you want my honest opinion on that. And probably a guy that should have gone back to school, but he is still young, so he's got time to figure things out. Then Darius Harris actually played a decent amount of snaps for the Chiefs a couple years ago, but hasn't gotten opportunities since and was okay on that Chiefs team. And then Buddy Johnson as well was once a 4th round pick by the Steelers in 2021. Still scratching and clawing for NFL opportunities. So it's a motley crew, to say the least. Not one I can rank terribly high right now. Could finish closer to the 15 to 20 range, though. If Overshown can get healthy and play at a high level and continue to develop, because year 1 to year 2 was a huge leap for him, he would be on a really nice trajectory. And then, man, Jack Sanborn, I think, as a compliment to Overshown, would make a lot of sense to me. That's not where we're at right now. We'll see if that's where they land. That, to me, is the highest potential for this group. And obviously that could happen within this season. It's just, we'll see, man. Let's move to the secondary. Not a ton of movement in the secondary as we look at the offseason changes. The main thing there is they let Jordan Lewis go in the slot, so that's one starter out. He gets a big deal from the Jaguars. But he's been, kind of streaky from year to year for Dallas and getting a little bit older. So I understand, not giving him that money when they have all these other players to be worried about paying. And then the main addition is going to be Siobhan Revell in the third round out of ECU. Myself and many people considered that a steal. But they also do get Deron Bland back, who only played 40% of their snaps last year. That was another injury last year that these things just really felt like they kept stacking on top of each other for Dallas's defense last year. And then they did trade for flavor of the month, first round bust, Kyer Elam from the Buffalo Bills. And then the only other loss would be Amani Oruwariye, a journeyman backup corner. So nothing really there. So, basically between losing Jordan Lewis and then getting a half season of Deron Bland back and Siobhan Revell in the third round, I didn't quite feel comfortable saying fully upgraded there. You could certainly argue for it, depending how you want to look at that. But I said neutral / to be determined, given we don't know what we're going to get from Revell here in his rookie season. And then with the safety group as well, no change, staying neutral. But let's break this final position group down. So it's a good secondary. They rank sniffing the top half of the league, 15th to 20th for me for the secondary grade with a B- grade. They are, again, questionable in terms of run defense. They get a C grade there, tier 3, 21st to 30th for DB run support. I think you guys probably know where this team ranking for run defense is headed. But from a coverage perspective, they do have a solid unit here to work with and not a ton of questions. But there is some upside for this to go up and be closer to a top 10 secondary. And I actually want to start with Deron Bland there for the heart of that conversation, because I'm not afraid to say that I don't know that we fully know what Deron Bland is. I think we feel good saying that he is a good starting corner, and you love that he can play outside and inside. So I'm not saying that we don't know what he is in the sense that he could be bad, but that 2023 season was his second year where he had 9 interceptions. From a production standpoint, he was one of the best corners in the entire NFL, if not the best, just in terms of interception numbers and just statistical production. And it's not just the interceptions. He had a reception percentage allowed of 56%, which is very good. Not elite, but certainly good. And he was also a big impact against the run that year too. So, last year he gets hurt. He gets on the field, and as what tends to happen, the interception numbers regress back to the mean. Fans love to overrate those interception numbers. But honestly, we've seen between his rookie season, where he started to carve out some solid playing time and had 5 picks in his rookie season too, playing mostly from the slot that year. Between that year and about a half a season last year and his second season, we have seen a very good NFL corner. But I think there might still be more in the tank. And then it also leaves a little bit up in the air because he's making that move back into the slot. In that second season where he had the sort of Pro Bowl caliber season, I don't know if he ended up making it or not. I'm sure he did because fans love picks. But it was a Pro Bowl caliber season. He was more of an outside corner. But when he played in the slot in 2022, he allowed 20% more receptions. He was picked on a little bit more in coverage. So he's going to very likely be this team's starting slot corner, replacing the hole left from Jordan Lewis. And I don't know that he has, he hasn't had that big statement season as a slot corner. So we need to kind of see what he looks like there. And then just kind of who is he as he heads into year 4 here, an injury riddled season last year, a contract year, yet another player that could be due for a massive contract here in Dallas. A lot of these guys, it is a dangerous territory for Dallas, between Pickens and Smith and Overshown and Bland. All these guys are up after this year. Trey Smith is after next year, but And Parsons hasn't been paid yet. It's crazy. But anyway, I think Bland is the wild card factor here. Can he be, something like a Brian Branch, or it's obviously high praise, but in the same window of like Devon Witherspoon and Marlon Humphrey, like these guys that, they can play outside, but they're real impacts as slot corners. Can year 4 be a big one for DaRon Bland, where I like his ball skills, I like his physicality, I think he's a good athlete, I think he can prove to be a really good player here? Or is it more like his rookie season, where he's a solid player in the slot, he's got the ball skills, he's going to take advantage of any mistakes you make, but not necessarily like a impact player necessarily, or a high-end impact player, kind of like he was in his one big season of 2023. So I just think at a volatile position here, it's a big year for DaRon Bland. And if he can be the best version of himself, that would help this team get closer to being more of a top 10 secondary, even though they still need some other things to go right here. So let's talk about Trayvon Diggs. I don't really have too much to say about Trayvon Diggs at this point. 2 years ago, it was sort of a, hey, Cowboys fans, I'm warning you right now, these pick numbers are going to come back to earth, and you're going to realize that Trayvon Diggs is just a solid corner. In fact, I think he's gotten more consistent as a coverage player than he was in that crazy season when he had double-digit interceptions. But after that year, he had 3 picks, got hurt in 2023. Last year, he missed a little bit of time, but 2 interceptions last year in about 11 games played. So, I don't think we need to have these heated conversations about Trayvon Diggs. I think most Cowboys fans are under the realization that he is a heady, intuitive, bigger corner that he's not the best mover out in space. He is far from a shutdown man-to-man corner, which is nice with Eberflus coming in. They're not going to ask him to play as much man-to-man as maybe Dan Quinn would have once upon a time. Like, I think he's going to be a good zone corner here. He's going to capitalize on any mistakes you make, and he can kind of read through the flow of traffic and take some good stuff away. But yeah, he's a guy that's probably going to allow about 60 to 65% of targets against him, which is, from a shutdown coverage perspective, average to above average. He's an okay run defender. He's a number 2 corner is really what Trayvon Diggs is, but they're paying him to be a number 1 corner. So I am very much imagining here that now that we, I think, have a pretty good idea of who Trayvon Diggs is, now that we're 3 years removed from a crazy outlier season in terms of interception numbers, I would imagine he plays pretty well here in a system that is pretty good for his skill set. And after this year, he becomes a clear-cut candidate. They can release him next year and save, I'm not getting the exact number here, but it looks like they can save anywhere from $15 to $16 million by releasing him next year. So with all these contracts coming up, I'm fully envisioning this is the last year for Trayvon Diggs, which would open the door potentially for a DaRon Bland extension if he plays well, or for someone like Savon Ravel or Kalen Carson if he steps up to take the starting corner job here. But another one of these players where it's like, probably not long for this team, but it is nice that he's here for now. And in many ways, we're seeing that there is a window for this Cowboys team. Not that they're the best roster in the league or anything, but they're kind of maybe at the end of the bridge, about to step off, if that makes sense, into a new era, a new roster window, if you will. One way or another, though, CB1, CB2, with DaRon Bland being the slot, if they do get into base defense, you would see Bland and Diggs out there together as your outside corners. You got a good floor with these two guys. You're really not going to be worried about those two guys like you are with CB3. It's going to be a competition. Right now, they're listing Kyer Elam, who's been in the league for a few years now. You know, I've always said I would have loved to see Kyer Elam, who I thought was always drafted to the wrong scheme in Buffalo. He was a press man, physical corner. You know, the best case scenario for him felt like a Shavarius Ward, Joey Porter Jr. type. And in Buffalo, they play that off-zone match style defense. And it's like, well, that's not what Kyer Elam does. You want him in a reactive physical assignment, not, playing back, having to use his zone IQ to like make plays and stuff. Unfortunately, that's the system here in Dallas too. So he keeps getting miscast. I would love to see like Kansas City or Detroit get a Kaiir Elam, and maybe after this year that happens. But for now, he is getting the bid. He's made some plays. I think to call him a colossal bust is an overstatement. He has been a bust and certainly not a fit in Buffalo. And I'm not fully writing him off. I understand why they're interested in him, and with Ravel still kind of coming off the ACL, making a leap in competition from playing at ECU. It's been like a year since he's played football. Like, I understand why Elam is getting the bid early. And if he looks good, that's great. Like, awesome. If he's figured some stuff out, we'll see what he can do this year. I'm not going to put the up arrow on him. I especially in this system, am not betting on him. If this was more of a man-heavy team, I would like it, but we know that's not what Matt Eberflus wants to do. So we'll see what he can do. Savon Ravel, though, I think is going to press for this job as soon as he's physically able to do so. He played a lot of cover 3 at ECU. I think he does have more of the zone feel than a Kaiir Elam. Still a lot to learn there as a rookie, but he is already 24 years old, and that was, to me, where he was best. I thought he was even a little bit more high-hipped and slower to react in man coverage. Not that I don't think he can run man coverage at the next level, but a little bit of Tariq Woolen to his game in that sense. And I like the fit quite a lot. To get him in the 3rd round feels like a steal. Now, we'll see about the health. Like, I got to think that for a guy that if he never tore his ACL in this last season, you got to think he would have been a 1st-round pick. So hopefully he can get healthy. But even then, like, it was a week 4 ACL injury or something at ECU. Kind of a red flag that teams were scared by the medicals when the average time lane there would tell you that he's basically ready by like training camp. So I love the pick. I think he is going to get an opportunity to start at some point here as long as he's healthy. But you also hope this isn't an Andrew Booth situation where we said Andrew Booth was someone that should have gone in the 1st round, and he's never really been able to be consistently available for anybody. So definitely an exciting rookie with a ton of upside, and we'll see if he can win that starting job. I'm not ready to quit Kalen Carson either. He had a very, very, I'll just say poor rookie season. Some flashes when he first got on the field, and then that fell off quickly. I liked him as a prospect. I think he cracked my top 10 corners, and they ended up getting him in the 5th round. He's a physical dude. I think he got the worst of being a rookie corner in the NFL. So we'll see if he can refocus, lock back in. I think he has all the traits to be a starter in the NFL. He's another guy that I think has had some durability questions at times. So between him and Ravel, hopefully they can stay healthy, but there's a lot of potential. Even like, I would even go as far as saying that if both these guys are pegged as starters for the 2026 Cowboys, with Diggs being a release candidate and one of these guys beating out Kaiir Elam, I would not be surprised. I think they have the upside to achieve that, though they definitely have a ways to go right now. Josh Butler played a little bit last year, and then he got hurt. That was, I think, like the straw that broke the camel's back for this secondary, but he's going to be back. Andrew Booth, not counting on anything from him. It is a very fascinating, polarizing cornerback room, to say the least. A lot of aggressive dart throws by this Cowboys front office. And then the safety group, I really don't have much to say about these guys. It is a very standard, adequate, ceiling-raising safety group. Malik Hooker, established veteran at this point, solid free safety, can come down, play the run, hasn't lived up to his hype as a 1st-round pick, but he's got some range, he's got some coverage feel, just hasn't really emerged as a plus player in really any regards. So he's a good starter. You like having him back there. No worries. Donovan Wilson's more of a, let's make sure we keep him in a strong safety role type of guy. He does not have the speed on the back end to have any sort of recovery or range. He's been pretty good as a run defender, but not great. He is more of a player that I wish they had another guy that you were more excited about to kind of push him for this job. He's in the last year of his deal. I think certainly this is going to be his last year in Dallas unless he comes back on like a really cheap deal because nobody was really interested in him. Maybe the one guy that could potentially push Donovan Wilson would be Marquise Bell, who out of Florida A&M, like 4.4 speed as a bigger safety, like 210 pounds, ended up having to play linebacker in 2023. A really good season came to a screeching halt when he got really exposed by Matt LaFleur in the Packers run game, to the extent that Jordan Love was on Micah Parsons' podcast, like basically making fun of Parsons and the Cowboys. Like, yeah, y'all had a safety at linebacker in that game. Like, of course we were going to run the piss out of the football. But that happened, and then they changed coordinators. They bring in Mike Zimmer, who maybe was having like PTSD from Jaron Kearse, because Zimmer never really knew how to use Jaron Kearse as that sort of oversized safety, or it just wasn't a good fit for him in his defense. But Bell like hardly played last year, and then eventually missed the rest of the season with a shoulder injury. But like maybe he has crazy traits and has shown some good play at times. So he's like the only safety that fascinates me. Israel Mukuamu is a big defensive back. That's the nicest thing I can say about him. He is stiff as a board, and I think that has been reflected in his inability to cover at the next level. Wanye Thomas was another one of these big safeties, undrafted out of Georgia Tech. So they got some size in that safety depth group, but no one that really gets me excited to push Donovan Wilson or project as a long-term replacement for that player. So that wraps up the secondary and our defensive overview. So let's look at the final rankings for this team. They don't come in dead last for run defense because Brandon Staley isn't their defensive coordinator. Thank God for that. But they do come in 31st for run defense. I think the concerns that good running teams are going to be able to do what the Packers did in that playoff game, and right, like the Ravens last year, didn't they run all over this team like week 3? It was just more of the same. Like, I don't think that narrative has changed on this Cowboys team. And with so many good rushing teams just in this conference alone, the Eagles, the Lions, the Packers, we'll see what the Niners can do getting back. I'm probably shortchanging other teams. It's just really hard to go on a run when eventually you're going to run into a team that can just dictate terms to you. So that probably hurts their ceiling as a team. But pass defense 9th and overall defense 19th. So kind of meets in the middle there, but it is like a week-to-week defensive ranking for this team. If you go against bad run games, yeah, this is like a top 10 defense basically, and they're going to make life hell for you. If you go against a great run game, there's very few teams that offense would rather play than the Dallas Cowboys. So that narrative, unfortunately, has not really changed for this team. But let's take a look at the Cowboys' special teams. And on a positive note with this unit, before we get into our final summary for this team, the Cowboys come in as our third ranking special teams. They have the best kicker in the NFL and the best return man in the NFL with Brandon Aubrey and Kevontae Turpin. I know Turpin did just run into some legal trouble. We'll see. He might get suspended or something, but I don't think it's something so serious that he would get released or anything like that. Forgive me if it's something really bad. I didn't look too far into it. And then even Brian Anger, their punter, graded out as the 7th best punter over the last 2 years. So their specialists are fantastic. Some of the physical tackling culture deficiencies do leak into some of their other special team rankings. So like they did come in 16th, for example, with the PFF team grade that they put together. So that's how you end up with them as the 3rd overall special teams. But it is obviously a strength for this team overall to have seriously, like, I thought it was going to be a while before we saw a kicker of Justin Tucker in his prime quality, but Brandon Aubrey might already have him beat. He is insane. The fact that dude came off the couch, what a story. He's so fun. At least Cowboys fans have Brandon Aubrey. But to wrap things up with this team, it is kind of funny that, like, if you're just looking at the team splits where they rank 17th on offense and 19th on defense, you're like, oh, it's a pretty balanced team. They're kind of a middle of the road team. And you know, their overall power ranking is middle of the road at 18th, but this team is so freaking like polarizing in terms of great passing game and great pass defense. Probably can't run the ball all that well and can't stop the run. This is one of the most polarizing matchup dependent teams in the league. So going to be an interesting team to track, I think, in terms of like week to week betting on this team, because I think you might be able to find some value on this team where like they might go like week 4, they might get steamrolled by the Detroit Lions. Everyone's going to be fading the Cowboys. Maybe they play a team that struggles to run the ball the next week and become a great value where they could kick another team's ass the next week. That's kind of who the Cowboys have been, but I don't think that's going to change this year. And I think they're even more explosive passing game-wise this year than they've been. But to wrap things up, their strengths are weapons, pass rush, and special teams. Their weaknesses are pass blocking for now, running backs, defensive line run defense, and linebackers for now. Depending on one of our wild card factors here, let's talk about those pivotal factors that are going to really swing the success of this Cowboys team and their season. So like I said, linebackers for now being a weakness. Well, if DeMarvin and Overshown can get back healthy and develop even further in year 3 for him, and maybe Jack Sanborn can be a surprisingly good signing for this team, those two together could actually make Dallas pretty damn solid at linebacker as early as this season. But the other wild cards here, I have youth along the offensive line. I think this team's going to be able to run block okay, which is going to at least hopefully allow this run game to survive and not be like all-time bad. But they have serious upside on that offensive line. And especially from a pass blocking perspective, if they can just be solid, everything's going to really come together for this passing game. And this could be one of the better passing attacks in the entire league if they can buy a little bit more time for Dak than we're projecting. Other wild cards here, we have Deron Bland. What is he really? We talked about that, but I'm not afraid to admit, I don't do this really for many players, but I just don't have a firm understanding of what he is, especially moving into the slot. So is he a star player like he was in 2023, or is he more of just an average player that had one massive season in terms of interception numbers? We do see a lot of those guys come back to earth, especially with Bland, who was a 5th round pick that wasn't really on the college radar for the most part. And then the last wild card is at the very top of it all, Brian Schottenheimer. What can he accomplish as a head coach? Like I said in the intro, I'm not just writing off the idea that he could be a sneaky good hire as Marty's son and someone that's called some good offenses here in Dallas. I'm willing to give him a chance at least and not completely pile on that hire. But obviously we didn't give the Cowboys very favorable coaching rankings. If Schottenheimer can really scheme up some good plays and provide a good culture aspect to this Cowboys team, despite the Jerry Jones of it all, then yeah, that would absolutely go a long way towards this team earning a lot of benefit of the doubt, but just beating these rankings overall. But let's take a look at their schedule and discuss kind of what their win projection should be here. The NFC West drew a pretty diabolical schedule. They get the NFC North, their own division is tough, and they got the AFC West. So they have to go through all, like, probably the top 3 divisions in football, their own being, they have to go through it twice. That's just going to be tough. They have some favorable games in there, especially early. The one really beatable team in their division, they get it home week 2. They're going to be fired up for that week 1 game at Philadelphia. Should be a fun one, but they'll be pretty big underdogs there. But, you know, they do have some winnable road games with the Jets and the Panthers, at the Raiders, at the Bears, maybe at Denver. Like, I think the Cowboys are a good enough team that you would rather get the teams that you think you're better than go on the road and take care of business, and then get the extra advantage of having to play Kansas City at home, Minnesota at home, even Arizona we haven't ranked yet, the Chargers at home, Green Bay at home. Although Green Bay loves playing in Jerry World, I will say that, but I do think things shook down for them in that sense. of getting the teams you want on the road and getting the teams you want at home. But their Vegas over-under is a very mediocre 7.5, and the math on them based on this schedule is 7.3 wins. So I think Vegas is right on the money there. Kind of comes down to your feelings about this team. If you want to go over or under, I would certainly stay away myself. And with the Super Bowl odds and the division odds as well, it's just tough because I do think the Cowboys are going to be so week to week and so matchup dependent that I think it's going to be a very inconsistent football team that has some really exciting moments that, you know, depending when it all lines up and if they go on win streaks or whatever, like they could suck you in and get you excited just to disappoint you again. But I mean, man, until they can really defend the run is the biggest reason, on top of some other issues for sure. But, you know, they're just going to have a hard time beating those teams that can really smash this team at the line of scrimmage. So I hate to bring everything back to that one aspect of this team, but it has been the kryptonite, the Achilles heel of this Cowboys team. And sadly, this front office did not fix it. So should be an interesting season for the Cowboys one way or another, as they do like to entertain. We know that. But speaking of being entertained, I hope you guys were entertained. I hope you enjoyed today's deep dive. Let me know what you guys think about the analysis, the ranking on the Cowboys. Who do you think comes next in this deep dive series? Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you very soon for our next deep dive.